Welcome. I'm Jennifer Dowley. I'm president of Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, and it's a great pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for coming, and I know many of you have driven a good hour or so to get here, and perhaps even crossed state lines. Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation is your community foundation. Our job is to work with you to strengthen our communities in Berkshire County, in Columbia and Northeast Dutchess counties in New York State, and Northwest Litchfield County in Connecticut. For 25 years, we have partnered with thousands of donors to distribute over $100 million supporting good works locally. While helping donors support the causes they care about is an important part of our work, so too is what we do as a proactive leader in the region, finding ways to strengthen resources for our communities and create new opportunities for our citizens to build better lives. We are fortunate to live in one of the most beautiful and desirable parts of our country. The quality of life in our small towns is of great solace to many used to a fast-paced and more anonymous existence. We have ski slopes, rivers for rafting, deep long lakes for swimming, mountain trails for hiking, exquisite and inspiring views. And as if that were not enough, we have world-class cultural institutions bringing us internationally renowned artists in dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. It's all quite wonderful, and yet it's not. About 10 years ago, two long-term residents from one of our small towns came into our office and said, and I quote, although I have to say it was 10 years ago, so forgive me if the quote isn't, because one of the speakers is here, I don't have it spot on. Quote, there's a problem with the economy in our area. Our town is not growing, in fact, it's struggling. We've talked to a number of businesses who say that they have a hard time finding employees. Those they do hire don't live locally because they can't afford a house. Can Berkshire Taconic do something about this? And so the foundation began its work. We formed a team, which is now called Housing Us. Let's put the us back in housing. Through Housing Us, we support volunteer housing groups in our towns and help bring nonprofit developers to the area to do the challenging work of building or renovating new units in very small increments. We also bring public attention to this crucial issue. We conducted a region-wide campaign to help reframe the public conversation about affordable housing. It's not about them, it's about us, our nurses, our teachers, our parents, our volunteer firefighters, our grandparents, and our children. Housing is at the core of our community's health. We all need a home that we can afford, a home where we can grow and care for ourselves and our families. The health and strength of our communities depends on our own resilience and that of our neighbors. When I think of strength, the image of a prairie comes to mind. A prairie is a thickly intertwined and diverse system of grasses that is nearly indestructible. We need our strong, diverse, intertwined grasses. Our poets, bankers, teachers, seniors, hedge fund managers, children, landscapers, multinational CEOs, electricians, emergency workers, and those of us in the nonprofit sector. We want and need our towns to be as strong and indestructible as prairies. There are 243,000 people in our region. One might think, how hard can it be to create affordable housing for so small a population? Well, as all of you know, it's a challenge. For example, the town of Salisbury, Connecticut, with a population just under 4,000, released a study in 2010 that estimated, and I do quote, Salisbury must build or convert approximately 200 affordable housing units by the year 2020 in order to achieve a steady state housing stock that could maintain the diverse population the town enjoys today. Since that study, 11 units have been created through one means or another. That leaves 189 to complete in the next 7 years. And that's why we're here today. Our job at Berkshire Taconic is to help you make a difference and create a place for everyone here in our region. I invite you all to join with us, with Housing Us, and let's see what we can do to make that possible. This afternoon, you will be hearing from folks who spend their days, and I dare say many an evening and a weekend, thinking and working to build affordable housing in our small rural towns. You will also hear from housing experts who spend their days trying to find ways to support affordable housing options in our region. We are so grateful to be able to connect you together today, right here in the heart of the Berkshire Taconic region, to talk about this crucial issue. We are also grateful to those who made this afternoon possible. Thank you so much, Berkshire Bank, for being the principal underwriter of this symposium. And Greylock Federal Credit Union, Lee Bank, Litchfield Bancorp, and Salisbury Bank and Trust, thank you for being our partners and co-sponsors. This is a symposium, and after we named it a symposium, I decided to look it up in the dictionary, and lo and behold, here's what it is. A drinking party at which ideas are freely exchanged. Well, we got it wrong, but maybe not. We're doing it in reverse. The wine will be served afterwards, coffee in the middle, and your job is to see to it that the ideas are exchanged freely throughout. And now, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Dunleavy, the Vice Chair of our Board of Directors, a retired banker and a long-term Berkshire County resident, who deeply understands issues of housing and affordability. Bill will provide a context for our conversation today. Before Bill comes up, though, I realize it's my job to say, in the most gracious way I can figure out, please turn off your cell phones. So, did you hear that, cell phones? Bill, thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome. First, let me thank Jennifer, Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, and Berkshire Bank for their lead roles in organizing this symposium, as well as Greylock Federal Credit Union, Lee Bank, Salisbury Bank, and Litchfield Bancorp for their co-sponsorships. Each of these forward-looking institutions is committed to building strong communities, and it is not surprising that they have chosen to invest in today's program. Why have so many people of diverse interests gathered today? I believe it is because we recognize that something is not right about housing in our communities. We want to explore and understand the problems and the strategies to address them. Jennifer, I'm going to make you nervous. I'm going to go off script here for just a minute. Shortly before I left this morning, I was reading my comments one more time, and I had caught a typo, which I thought I'd share with you. I retired about a year ago, and I do a lot more typing now than I used to. The D key and the F key are right next to each other. And I'm one of these people, no matter how many times I read something, I read what I think I wrote. But this time, fortunately, I caught it because I said that one of our speakers was going to speak about adorable housing. Be sure, we're talking about affordable housing today. This is a beautiful region, and we would love to have attractive housing. I don't know about adorable. But our topic today is affordable, and it is very appropriate that we're all here, whether we're from Lenox, Massachusetts, or Canaan, New York, or Sharon, Connecticut. Many, if not all of the issues are the same, and we can benefit greatly by being together and sharing our questions and sharing our ideas. For the same reason, it's very appropriate that Berkshire Taconic has taken the lead role in organizing this. I've been on the board 5 or 6 years, and at every planning retreat, I'm absolutely positive affordable housing is probably among the top 3 items that we identify that we need to address as a community, or help the community address. Okay, Jennifer, I'm back on. Housing is one of the cornerstones of society in America. Housing is the cornerstone of opportunity. Housing is the cornerstone of our national and local economies. Housing is the cornerstone of our individual communities. Housing is central to our principles of independence and dignity. Housing costs represent the largest single portion of the household budget for Americans, The generally accepted definition of affordability is for a household to pay no more than 30% of its annual income on housing. For individuals, families, and entire communities, housing that costs too much leaves too little for discretionary spending, which fuels the rest of the economy. This in turn drives young workers and families away from our communities and perversely limits job opportunities and economic expansion. Housing in this region is too expensive, a function of insufficient supply to meet the demand, but also because the supply we have does not meet the various needs of our population. The situation will get worse unless we act. Demographic trends and economic realities all point to a need for more, smaller houses on smaller lots that are energy efficient, close to services like schools, grocery stores, and that are priced affordably for workers, young families, empty nesters, and the elderly. That means new ways of thinking, organizing, and financing residential development, from infill development in our town centers, including housing above commercial businesses, to infrastructure, however limited, to handle that higher density in other parts of town, to dial-a-ride and other local shuttle services, and the use of land trusts and housing trusts and other mechanisms to acquire land and finance construction. The world is changing. Our planning, zoning, development, infrastructure, and state of mind must change with it. Fortunately, our state leaders understand the housing needs of a new time. While financial support from Washington has been reducing, our governors and legislative leaders understand that our economy, our housing market, and let's face it, our entire world changed in 2008. They are providing increasing resources for the types of housing we need. Our task and our mission today is to educate ourselves and our local leadership, elected and volunteer, as we and they make planning, zoning, and development decisions about the housing needs of our future. We must deflate the myths that deterred us. We need to find ways to marry state and local resources with assistance from the private sector and philanthropic partners. It is our hope that we will all leave this afternoon's discussion knowing a great deal more than we do now, and with the tools to take more action in each of our communities to create the kinds of housing that we need to provide a place for everyone. Let's take a look at some sobering statistics that underscore our dilemma. First, with respect to home ownership, making very conservative assumptions, a 30-year mortgage at 3.75% interest with a 10% down payment. The median household income for each of our 4 counties doesn't come close to qualifying for a mortgage for the median sales price in our counties. As the slide shows, the median, not average, household income in Columbia County would fall $8,800 short. It only gets worse. The shortfall in Berkshire County is $11,500, and in Litchfield it is $12,500. In Dutchess County, the gap is $22,800. The amount of rental housing available for our 4 counties also falls short. Nationwide, 34% of households rent. All of our counties fall below offering that level of rental housing. Because the supply of rental housing is so short, too many renters spend too much of their income on rent. In Berkshire County, 50% of renters, 1 out of 2, spend 30% or more of their income on rent. In Columbia and Dutchess counties, it's 44% and 63% respectively. And in Litchfield County, it's 48%. Rental expense, consuming these large proportions of income, creates untenable stresses for families, some severely because they have a small fraction of their remaining income available for food, clothing, transportation, healthcare, or other necessities. Often parents must work 2 or more jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Imagine what that does for helping the kids with their homework. Unfortunately, our 3 states are distinguished by high rental costs. In Connecticut, the amount a household must earn per hour to afford a typical 2-bedroom apartment is $23.58 an hour. In New York, it is $24.68, and in Massachusetts, $22.84. The quick arithmetic conclusion, you would have to earn an annual salary in and around $50,000 just to afford to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Given the minimum wage in our 3 states is between $7.25 and $8.25 an hour, this is daunting. Many of the people we depend on for essential services earn less than $50,000, as do many other employees in our increasingly service-based economy. The real problem we face is that these numbers, the cost and the supply, are, unless we act, likely to get worse, because as we all learned in Economics 101, rising demand will drive up the price, and the demand is going to increase. In Connecticut, even with the huge housing downturn and price decline, housing prices are up 47% from 2000 to 2011, while personal income is up 42%. However, for renters, their incomes have risen only 7%, while rental prices have risen 45% in that same period of time. Why is this so? Demography and economic pressure. It is no secret that our states are old and getting older. We have been in the top 10 of states losing 25 to 34-year-old population over the last 2 decades. We all know the stories. In Falls Village, Connecticut, a few years ago, the entire kindergarten class was comprised of just 5 children. Not enough for a boy or Girl Scout troop, a soccer team, or much else. One Connecticut town official commented, "You show me a town with no children, I'll show you a town with no future." So not only will we need affordable homes for our aging empty nesters, but if we are to have a future, if we are to have the young workers for our businesses and schools, our town halls and our volunteer boards and commissions, our volunteer fire departments and rescue squads, we will need homes. We will need homes that young professionals and young families can afford, and smaller, easily accessible housing units for our aging population. Consider just these few indicators, and there is much more where this came from. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute, more than half of all current workers, 56%, and more than half of all retirees, 54%, have less than $25,000 in the bank. The average college or grad school debt for kids getting out of school is currently $25,300. Lenders typically require a 20% down payment. Household size has shrunk over the last 2 decades, creating the need for more homes for more households. While the recession has reversed that trend slightly, we will be producing more households again as the economy improves. So if you're nearing retirement age, or a young professional, or a young couple with $50,000 in education debt, and needing $40,000 to buy a $200,000 home or condo, do you think you are going to need affordable rental or townhome? I think so. And will you be looking to rent or buy such a home in a location that's walkable to the food store, pharmacy, place of worship in the town center, so you don't have to spend more money to run your car? I think so. And given the cost of heating oil and other fuels, will you want it to be energy efficient and not too large? I think so. That is the coming market, if it is not already here. Why don't we have more of that type of housing already? Simple, we have let myths deter us, and we have been slow to awaken to the dilemma. Some people feel that affordable and mixed income housing will bring hordes of school children to increase school budgets and taxes. Research from Rutgers has shown that 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom multifamily units bring less than 1 child for every 4 units. And 3-bedroom starter homes bring just 2 for every 3 new homes. UMass research shows that school budgets aren't sensitive to enrollment costs in any case. They go up because of healthcare, energy, and labor costs. Beyond all that, demographic trends have school enrollments shrinking through 2020. So there will be room in classrooms, even if the new homes we build do bring more children to educate. And in the long term, that is exactly the kind of growth we want and we need. Some people feel that affordable and mixed income housing will lower property values. Research from MIT and the Enterprise Foundation has shown us that is wrong. MIT found that homes adjacent to affordable housing in 8 towns along I-495 went up in value or stayed the same. And anecdotal evidence from our housing friends in Connecticut shows that phenomenon repeatedly. Some people feel that affordable and mixed income housing will increase crime. Testimonials from scores of municipal leaders and police officials show there is no higher rate of crime in such neighborhoods. As for fears that outsiders will move in, that has simply not been the case over the years. The news of new housing doesn't spread very far and wide. And so those new units are filled by residents of our local communities, our own friends and family. Beyond all of that, people believe that density, for example, 4 or more housing units on an acre, is ugly and can't be designed to fit its surroundings. Many of the historic village centers in our towns already have 4 or more units per acre houses on small lots and multifamily buildings. This density already exists in many of our towns and can be extended or replicated in other parts of our towns. There are many, many examples of beautiful, affordable, and mixed income housing with charming detail, built to scale to fit its surroundings in each of our states. Right now in Kent, Connecticut, they are building Stewart Farms apartments, reconstructing an antique farmhouse in walking distance to the town's village center into 5 affordable apartments. In Stockbridge, Massachusetts, the Pine Woods development is an example of the attractive new construction of 30 units of rental housing in one of our historic towns where the housing was built on 3 acres, conserving 17 acres as permanently protected open space. The stereotype of affordable housing as high-rise buildings built of wrong materials in the wrong place is just that, a stereotype. So what is our task? It's to do good by providing the homes that people will need and can afford. But in doing good, we can also do well. If we create the homes that the market demands, we can increase our grand lists of taxable property, harvest more revenues for our town services without increasing our mill rates. We can remake our town centers into lively, walkable, shop-filled, fun-filled destinations for town residents. We will need help. HUD, the Federal Home Loan Bank, and the USDA, despite their tighter budgets in recent years, along with our states, each with a governor who understands housing needs and housing importance, are ready to provide the funds for infrastructure, for gap financing, for environmental remediation, for development incentives, and other needs that our builders and towns will require. It is our job to ensure that our facts are up to date, that we understand the housing market and the needs of our residents, and that we connect the resources we have to the communities we care so much about. So listen carefully today, take good notes, and then head out to provide the housing that all of our residents need. In so doing, we will help them, help ourselves, and help our communities. Next on the program is our keynote presentation, and for that we are pleased to welcome Barbara Fields, Regional Administrator of the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Barbara was appointed to that position by President Obama and HUD Secretary Donovan in April 2011. Prior to joining HUD, Barbara served for 20 years as the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Office of Local Initiatives Support Corporation, the nation's leading development intermediary. She serves on the Board of Directors of the Institute for Comprehensive Community Development and on the New England Community Advisory Council of the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston. Barbara is a graduate of Tufts University and earned a master's degree in city planning from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Recently, she has participated in programs similar to ours with former Senator George Mitchell and Lieutenant Governor Murray. Her topic today is Building and Preserving Affordable Housing in Rural Communities, a Federal Perspective. Barbara, it is our privilege to welcome you today to the Berkshire Taconic region.
Thank you, Bill, so much for that kind introduction and for your very good words. I'm not sure I have much to add to what you said. I think you were spot on in your remarks. But first, I just wanted to thank the foundation for inviting me out to the Berkshires. I didn't think I would have an opportunity to stand on a stage that has hosted Taj Mahal and Judy Collins. So thank you for that unique opportunity into the beautiful building. As Bill mentioned, in my prior life, which just goes back a year and a half ago, I spent 20 years on the ground involved in affordable housing and community development. And I come to HUD with a perspective that I always jokingly say I don't care about housing. But what I'm really trying to say is I think of housing as a starting point and not the end point. And that the housing that we invest in is about building communities. And that those homes that we invest in have to connect to good schools, good transportation, access to health care, and many of the things that Bill spoke about. So I'm so pleased to hear your perspective out here in the Berkshires is similar to mine. And in a prior life, I had a job in Massachusetts for an agency that doesn't exist anymore called the Massachusetts Government Land Bank. It's now part of Mass Development, and Berkshire County was one of the areas in my portfolio. So I am pleased to be out here again, and at such a wonderful time of year. I don't know if we're joined here today by Representative Farley Bouvier and Senator Downey, but if they are here, I welcome them and I look forward to meeting them, but appreciate the fact that your local elected officials have taken the time as well to join with you in looking at these issues. One of the things that I really enjoy about my role as regional administrator, I cover the 6 states of New England, is getting out and getting to see the things that we are doing with the funds at HUD. And I really enjoy meeting with local people. So I'll give some remarks today, but I really welcome some Q&A, and you have a terrific panel. Some of my colleagues, Susan Elliott from Federal Home Loan Bank, Aaron and Nick Lundgren, and Jay Healy from USDA, who have really helped to educate me about what are some of the best things going on around New England in this area and learning what some of our challenges are. So I welcome to hear from them as well later. I wanted to thank the Berkshire Taconic Foundation and the terrific work that you've been doing the last few years, getting the job done on the ground, and for taking the time to host these types of discussions. It does take a large chunk of your time to come to these, but hopefully it will be worthwhile to share ideas, to share strategies, because it's places like these that partnerships are born, and I really do think it takes all hands on deck, as you said, Bill, to try and deal with some of these challenges. I think that Bill was spot on in his assessment, and I appreciated the slides he showed to outline some of the housing challenges we're facing. The challenges are faced in small communities and big communities, in cities and rural communities across the country. And we are trying to the best of our abilities at HUD to try and put together policies and programs to address some of these needs. The answer, of course, in my opinion, lies in finding sustainable ways to plan for the future while meeting the needs of today. So HUD remains committed to nurturing robust and strong and vibrant local communities, both in rural areas and metropolitan areas, and creating housing and communities that are built to last. As I always say, we need to think about 2050 and think backwards. How do we want to get there? What do we want to do with our investments today that will get us to the kind of communities that we, our children, and our grandchildren will hopefully have an opportunity to live and thrive in? Rural communities particularly feel these challenges, and you have a certain set of challenges as outlined. Often in rural communities, what we have seen is sometimes there's a lack of capacity in that you have small staffs, insufficient staff, and perhaps need support in trying to implement some of the programs that even HUD delivers. In addition, as Bill outlined so well, is the shifting economy locally and economic opportunity for young people who you want to stay in your communities as well. And the shift has particularly hit, and that was quite a shocking number from Falls Village, where I actually have spent some time. It's a beautiful community. You think people would want to live there, but obviously needing the opportunity to thrive and find jobs. And as Bill also mentioned, in rural communities, particularly the aging population, and how are we going to work on that. I particularly know that this summer I had opportunity to meet former HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros, and his big issue is around the aging population and that seniors are in homes that they want to stay in. So what are we doing on design issues to allow people to stay in their homes into the future? And I'll, as an aside, say I was just up in Maine last week and had a bit of an argument I didn't mean to get into, but I was looking at some new senior housing, a converted school, and I was very upset to see that they had old-style bathtubs. And I was looking more for the walk-ins, because any of us who have dealt with senior housing, even I, in my age, sometimes getting the leg over into the shower is difficult. And I was saying that I didn't, I was hoping that they could have thought more about that. And so hopefully we can get in on the ground floor and have those types of discussion. What are some of the design things that will make all of the different populations in our community able to access the housing we invest in? So at HUD, the Secretary is very fond of saying one size doesn't fit all. We're putting the UD back in HUD as you're putting us back in housing. I like that, and maybe have to steal that line, but it's not just urban development, but it's also, I think about it broadly as community development, how that connects to housing. And we're trying to come up with strategies that we understand would work better in a rural community than an urban community. And make sure that we're not, all of our programs are going to be designed that only work in one type of place. So our strategies are centered around removing unnecessary burdens on developers and encouraging more private investment into affordable rental housing. Not only so that we can stretch the federal dollars, but also to, I think, have a learning environment between the private and public sector about what works and what doesn't. At a time when we have worst-case housing needs in this country, they're at an all-time high. Having lost 1.5 million homes from our nation's affordable housing stock inside of a decade, we need all resources to come to the table. We need all hands on deck, as Bill said. So putting the federal government back in the business of affordable rental housing requires HUD itself to come into the 21st century. And we have focused on 5 major strategies. Obviously, first and foremost at HUD is looking at the foreclosure issue across the country. And that affects different parts of the country differently. Here in New England, while anyone in a foreclosure situation is one family too many, we've certainly not had some of the steep challenges that we faced in other parts of the country. But particularly around the rental housing development and something that we're working on, the first thing I will say is we need to focus on preservation. So we have a lot of our programs are focusing how we can bring more private dollars in. I'll speak a little more about that. In addition, we have come together with other federal agencies, particularly Department of Treasury and USDA, to have a rental policy working group to identify ways that we could better respond across federal agencies so that we break out of our silos and work together. One of the most obvious examples that's often discussed is when we come out to do inspections and reporting, could we align better so that the developers of affordable housing, and it would be particularly in rural areas where you have smaller units numbers, we're not coming out repetitively and maybe aligning those visits better and making it easier on the owners and developers. One of the most important things to come out of this interagency working group was ways to reform and expand the low-income housing tax credit, something that I worked on quite a bit in my former life. Over the past quarter century, the low-income housing tax credit, or was in the HUD and housing world lingo we call LIHTC. Try not to use too much lingo. We are very interested in often shortening things, but using the tax credit has helped to finance the construction and preservation of more than 1.8 million rental homes across the country, which in addition has created 3.6 million jobs and leveraged $75 billion in private capital. The tax credit was responsible for about half of all multifamily production in the 1990s, and I'm very proud of the work of the Obama administration through the Recovery Act to save the tax credit in 2008, as Bill said, when the market, people say it slowed down, it actually ground to a total halt in 2009, and I was on the development and investment side at that time. And really it was the work of the Obama administration to keep that market moving. Because of those of us in the housing development side know that it takes 2 or 3 years to come to market. So if you're not getting investment in 2009, that means you won't have units coming online in 2010, 2011. Now the market has been coming back, and this is a powerful tool for many of our local partners, but often it's been difficult to use. Some investors using the LIHTC have also wanted to access FHA financing. and had to follow FHA standard approval process, which could take more than a year. So that not only leaves critical affordable housing stuck in the pipeline and discourages potential partners from investing, it also leaves millions of dollars of private capital on the sidelines at a time when it's most needed. So in February, HUD announced a pilot program in 4 cities, Boston, Chicago, Detroit, and Los Angeles, to streamline the approval process, which could cut the time needed to review and approve financing applications from a year down to as little as 90 days. I am pleased to announce that I was constantly pushing, and I don't think it was myself alone, but others, and just this summer HUD announced that demonstration is now nationwide, so that anyone coming in to use this powerful rental development tool and using another piece of HUD financing can have an expedited review process. Last year alone, FHA endorsed more than $500 million in commitments to LIHTC projects. That was a staggering 150% increase since President Obama took office. And we're hoping with this pilot program we can get those numbers to go higher. In addition, we have a proposal in the fiscal year 2013 budget to increase the basis boost to the tax credit, which would help to preserve federally assisted housing and allow for income averaging. So currently, low-income housing tax credit projects serve families making 60% of the median or less. And our argument is that if we go up to 80%, then you may be able to reach those families making 20 and 30% more easily. Of course, no kind of affordable housing is greater need than public housing in this country. And right now, public housing is at a crossroads. In this country, there is I think an underestimate, but an estimate of a backlog of $26 billion in capital needs for public housing across the country. At a time when 7 million households are paying more than half their income for housing or living in substandard housing, the need for this public housing and additional housing is great, as you can imagine. For too long, antiquated rules have prevented anyone but the federal government from investing in those types of properties. And that's why we were very excited last year when Congress agreed to a demonstration program. It's called the Rental Assistance Demonstration, or RAD. And I've been working with colleagues around the region to try and use this new program. RAD will allow owners of public and other federally assisted housing to make standard life cycle improvements into the inventory, modernize or replace obsolete units, and stem the loss of the stock. So we're able to work with up to 60,000 public housing units around the country, so it can just be at any size. And I think this is one tool that could be used for smaller public housing authorities in your region, as well as larger ones in the metro areas. At the bottom of the bill, we were able to get in multifamily developments. Again, there's an unlimited number that can try and use this. And I know I really put an emphasis on demonstration. The folks in headquarters who are promoting this program have really asked us to go out, talk about this a lot, try and get people lined up, see what is the appetite for this, both from public and multifamily developments, to bring private capital in and see what the interest and what we are able to get from the private market. So the first NOFA for this, Notice of Funding Availability, is out, and we are really trying to we hope that there's a lot of interest here in New England to try this new product and see how it's working. Although every PHA and every project will obviously be different, as a class, we're hopeful that the rural public housing authorities in New England will take a serious look at this. We have strong financial institutions across the region that hopefully will step to the table and be interested in working on this program. A small PHA, typically the rural ones, may find conversion compelling in terms of simplification and streamlining of the financing. If the PHA only has one project and it converts under this program, it will be out of the public housing program in its entirety, which would include some of the reporting requirements that have become quite onerous. If a PHA already operates a voucher program, it would be, and it might be in 2 or 3 different programs, it would allow it to streamline it into one subsidy program. I can come back to that later if there are more questions. I'm hoping I'm not getting too technical for everyone in the audience. The other program that I think is very focused here in rural communities, and I was glad to meet one of our grantees here, is our Sustainable Communities Program. 3 years ago, the Secretary of HUD formed a historic partnership with the Department of Transportation and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, to think about ways that the federal government could work with local partners in a pragmatic regional approach to problem solving that supports local priorities, local leadership, local resources, and local innovation. It brings together our 3 agencies to coordinate our policies and our programs. Traditionally, there have been no coordination among housing, transportation, and land use investments, and I think Bill spoke to this as well, that in rural areas, people not only spend too much of their income on housing, but too much on transportation. So now we are beginning the discussion to plan for more sustainable and equitable development, trying to remove the traditional federal silos and get us out together in the community talking, so that when we're planning for affordable homes, they may be connected to safe streets, new transportation investments, and opportunities for employment. And to keep this focus together, I often joke that I take the train together with the EPA regional administrator, and I think it's quite common for me to be talking with him, but I forget that in the past this wasn't always happening, that the discussion really starts one by one in our communities coming together. And I'm thrilled to see Jay Healy here today because USDA has become part of this partnership as well as we talk about the different resources. For example, USDA has infrastructure resources, HUD through our Community Development Block Grant has resources, and we haven't always been talking to one another and aligning what we have at our level. Then the expectation at the local level is you're juggling through different departments and not knowing which pieces go where, and really we have a responsibility to try and align better. And particularly around the transportation issue, when 52% of working families' income is devoted to housing and transportation in rural areas, we know we have a responsibility to them and to future generations that the investments we make today have an impact of bringing together public transportation and affordable housing. Again, these grants are not about telling communities what to do, but listening and helping them realize what the local vision is for creating jobs and creating homes. So over the last 2 years, HUD has awarded 152 of these grants, and we've delivered some of that here in New England. I'm happy to say that we've supported 28 grants in this region, and in addition, EPA and DOT have made 20 grants. Where have these grants gone? Well, one of our ones is right here in Berkshire County. The Berkshire Regional Planning Commission was one of our first grantees in 2010. I understand there's a meeting tonight. If I can stay, I can hear on the Economic Development Committee meeting. We made a grant of nearly $600,000 to allow Berkshire County to create a regional plan. Community development is the implementation of the plans, and I'm glad to see HUD back in the business of giving some money to allow communities to think about their strategies for moving forward before making the investments. I understand that the Planning Commission is about halfway through their 3-year work. These were grants to cover 3 years, and if you haven't been involved in this project, I hope you will consider getting involved with the remaining planning work. Even if you're not in Berkshire County, perhaps taking a look at the work here can offer lessons in the areas in the other counties here represented from New York and Connecticut. I know that Nick is here, and there is one grant that goes from Holyoke down to Hartford, spanning 2 states. So again, crossing state lines is something that we're doing as well with our money, as well as the work you're doing here. In Connecticut, we have also given out to rural Connecticut towns. The Windham Regional Council of Governments in Eastern Connecticut was an awardee, and they are in the process of coming together. It's a partnership of 5 regional planning and affordable housing and economic development councils, and the grantees are working towards coming up with a plan for Eastern Connecticut. For a majority of Eastern Connecticut, over 50% of the household income is going to transportation and housing, and only 25% of low-income individuals in that area are receiving any type of housing assistance. So trying to align our resources and along with the public transportation in that area is one of the goals there. In the summer, I have had the chance also to be up in northern Maine, where we're bringing 2 counties together, but we also understand the challenges in large areas like that of bringing rural communities together, one facing more towards the Atlantic Ocean and one facing inland and more of a lumber industry. So we've had a lot of on-the-ground conversations about bringing people together across counties. In addition, I just wanted to wrap up by saying that one of the other efforts of this administration is that in 2011 they formed a White House Rural Council, again to bring together across the silo busting, to begin those conversations, to begin talking, how are we at the federal level going to make sure that the investments we have, no matter what the budget is, that they make more sense, that we can leverage private investment and begin to connect. And that has been a partnership with HUD, DOT, USDA, and EPA, as I said. Beyond these, our funds are still coming into the rural areas. CDBG money, block grant money that is being invested here. I know people have thought about it in the housing, but also in addition, our money has gone for some economic development efforts in this region. One tool that I wanted to make you aware of, we now have something called Community Planning and Development, or CPD Maps. It is an online tool available to the public that is hopefully will be a time-saving tool. There are user-friendly maps that give you the capability to, by census tract, to see where we are investing our money. So you can go online and see where our different programs, and we have a myriad of them, are being used in your community. You can reach this at www.hud.gov and look for CPD maps. But hopefully this is a useful tool. I know internally even HUD staff are using this to see where our various investments are going in different communities. So in conclusion, let me say that these efforts all come down to a simple belief that when you choose your home, you don't just choose your home. You choose the schools your children will go to, the transportation to work, the public safety in a community. And as Bill had said, one of the things that I'm a big advocate and hope I'm being a voice for in government is that we talk about public-private partnership. But the important third leg are the nonprofits. In the rest of the world, they're called NGOs, or non-governmental organizations. And everywhere I go, I urge communities to bring the nonprofits to the table, which I think you're already doing out here. And obviously the leadership of philanthropy in doing that is very important. We need all hands on deck, and I think this more tripartite, public, private, and NGO or nonprofit is very important for the work ahead, the work in building homes. So the work ahead will not be building homes, engaging residents, leveraging our investments, advocating for innovative solutions. And we need to think seriously about how each of us can come to the table with a different piece. I'm hoping that HUD can come with our resources and be engaged in local conversations to understand more about how our work is going on here, what's working, what's not working, that it is not just a monologue but a dialogue, and that we understand that home matters to all of us. It's going to take a partnership, as I said, and we want to sustain these efforts over time. The problems in this county have developed over, as you mentioned, it's been a decade or more since the issues were realized. It will take more than that amount of time to move forward. So I know that we need to sustain our investment, sustain this discussion, and work to the future. I appreciate your inviting me here today, and I will welcome any questions later or whatever time we have in the program. But thank you very much. If there were any questions at this point. I did see the caffeine kick in first.
What funds are available now for affordable senior housing through HUD?
We have various programs in our multifamily program. I have to say, actually, I'm very saddened by the fact that the 202 program, which has been one of the most effective, Congress did not see fit to put it into the budget for 2012. But there are other dollars through the home program and our multifamily loan, the FHA loan program. I think the best way to work on any development actually is going to be using HUD dollars with state dollars. And Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York, as was said earlier, have governors who have actually made a very strong commitment to housing. So I think that puts this region in an advantage because our money alone will not fund 100% of the work that needs to get done. As well as there's the low-income housing tax credit and federal historic credits for those buildings that are renovated, like the school I mentioned that I have seen. So there's a I do think that there are Most projects will have a variety of different resources, but those are some of the ones from the federal side. Yes.
The percentage spent on housing would include energy costs, and one disappointment I've had is that the energy improvement mortgage from FHA is not really promoted anymore. It was quite successful in the late 90s, and local lenders sometimes don't even know about it. I work for a nonprofit that does energy assessment, and we do get a lot of homeowner calls, how can I get one of these? And I'm wondering if there's anything in HUD to make this come back.
There is a renewed effort to try and get the information out on these, and I don't have all the information here, but it's something I can get back to you on. I know that up in Maine, we've really been promoting these, and we want to now expand it because there has been such a large request from local lenders to have these. In addition, energy efficiency is being driven into all of our projects, but in this region particularly, we're looking at the area from the whole state of Rhode Island across to New Bedford is a target area that HUD chose different target areas in different parts of the country to look at our different programs, and we were pleased to be chosen for the one area in New England to look at the energy, what we can do to enhance it, and that's been one component of it. We're offering some energy trainings, and I can get you some information. There's one coming up in Boston if people can get there to try and reach out around other tools that we have. But clearly in New England, we have high housing costs, we have old housing stock, and the energy costs drive up the cost for most families in this region. Yes?
I can't hear the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if we have a mic. I can
There's
repeat
mics
them.
in the front if you want to walk up to them, please. We have one in each aisle.
Microphones right here for questions. And we have microphones right here for questions. And also, everything that is mentioned by any of the panelists about information that they will get to us, it will come to the foundation. We will post everything on the Housing Us website. Housingus.org. Yes.
Well, for future questions, if there's time for one or two more questions, I'll repeat the question for you. In the back?
Yes, you're saying you're trying to coordinate funding from HUD and different departments and private and state dollars. Is there an attempt to make all of the requirements of all these funding sources similar and the reporting mechanisms similar, so that when we have multiple funding sources, we don't have 5 or 10 different reports and standards to meet?
The question was whether there is an effort underway to not only coordinate funding sources, but reporting on those sources and the burdensome requirements that each of the various lenders and investors put upon developers, something I'm quite familiar with from the other side of the table. And I will say on our end, we are focused on changing the way that HUD does business. So externally it's these relationships, but internally the first area where we're trying to reduce the amount of reporting is in the public housing arena. For the multifamily, I do think, and Aaron will be speaking later, there are attempts at a statewide level to look at that. I think HUD has joined some of the discussions, and hopefully we will be able to make progress, but our initial effort at HUD, being a large federal agency, is focused in the public housing arena, and I hope that once we get some traction there that we can move to other areas, but I think it's something front and center. It's a question of how we roll that out, and as I said right now, it's focused on one particular area. Yes?
I was wondering, what was the status of the former Section 8 voucher program, which seemed to be such a wonderful way to bridge private and public housing assistance. It seems to have been diminished so greatly, yet I think it's such a great program.
So she's asking about the Section 8, about, it still exists, but you said which former, you said a former program?
Yeah, what's the status of the allocation? Why is there not more money?
That is a great question. She wants to know why there's not more money for Section 8. So Section 8 is obviously is the largest program and the largest part of the HUD budget. The Secretary spends a good portion of his year up on Capitol Hill fighting for the HUD budget, and As I said, the first thing is preservation, and I think one of the things that we keep fighting for is to keep the Section 8 budget, but how do we streamline it, make it work better? I do think this rental assistance demonstration program is an effort to bring more private capital in for the physical needs, because our budget is so stretched on the Section 8 providing people rental assistance. So our budget can't keep growing in all different areas. A way to really focus at least on getting some assistance on the capital side. But it's an ongoing battle. Right after I took this job, the HUD budget was cut. It was just, okay, this is going to be great. I got to go out and tell you how we're going to help you, but the budgets keep getting cut. We can't say that we've been happy with some of the decisions, but we keep trying to be smarter about the resources we do have. And the Sustainable Communities was funded in 2010 and 2011. It was not funded in 2012. We hope to get it back in 2013. And some people have said to me, well, that's very unrealistic of you, Barbara. They're going to put something back in. But housing counseling, which is another major component I didn't talk about today, was cut out in the 2011 budget and was put back in 2012. To totally cut out a part of the budget, I think, was at a time when more people were struggling to keep their homes. But I think some people on the Hill saw the light and put that back in, so I am hopeful that Sustainable Communities may come back, focus on what we can do to help more people. The preservation is the top, and I think that we understand that even to keep the Section 8 program a way, again, to bring private capital into some of these deals is going to be one of the ways we do this, and focus hopefully on a stronger budget for HUD going forward. But I understand what you're saying. I wish I had more positive news, but we continue to try and take the dollars we have. I think here in New England, also, a lot of the innovation is happening in this region of the country. And when I came to HUD, I said I had a lot to learn, and I had a learning curve, but sometimes it goes straight up. And I really do think from some of my colleagues, be it at the state or in the nonprofit community or the Federal Home Loan Bank, I'm continually trying to learn so that, one, I bring the message from headquarters out to the field, but I'm trying to hear what goes on in our region, and particularly in our rural communities. And I'm glad to be with you today. I will be up in Vermont next week. These are particular challenges. Some of the HUD programs don't work as well in rural communities. And I have to hear that, I have to understand it, and bring that message back to DC. That's also part of my job. I guess one final question, or in the back?
When you bring back the message, I would have to say that housing choice voucher programs are an essential part of housing assistance in rural communities. There are rural communities that do not have public housing authorities. And so housing choice vouchers are the only rental assistance that are available to most families, especially in small rural counties.
Did everyone hear that housing choice vouchers is the only thing in some rural communities? And I appreciate that, and I'm learning more all the time about better ways to use this program. I'm looking at Aaron as we have been talking a lot about housing choice and how can we use it more effectively here in New England, particularly to preserve what we already have. I would have to say one of my biggest concerns, particularly in New England, which is it's sort of not distributed evenly across the country. We have large housing stock. We don't want to lose any more of what we already have that we've worked hard to invest in over the last 30, 40 years. And is a big challenge, I think, in these communities. But I hear that, and will continue to be an advocate for that, particularly in rural New England. I think I hear it more than some of my colleagues in other parts of the country. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Barbara. Now we'd like to move on to the next part of our program, which is the first of our panels on the local context, realities of housing development in small towns. So we have David Rich, who's a director of Berkshire Taconic Foundation and the president of Housing Us, and his panel. David, please come up.
we're settling in, Barbara, thank you for your thoughtful, articulate words and really describing the broad array of programs HUD is working on. It's not easy to change your bureaucracy, and I think you guys are doing a terrific job, and for your call to action. Again, my name is David Rich, and I'll be facilitating our first of two panels. And as Bill said, the title is Local Context, Realities of Housing Development in Our Small Towns. We really are talking about small towns. If you look at Great Barrington, sort of the epicenter of the region that the Berkshire Taconic Foundation works in, and drive 35 miles in every direction, you're going to touch 67 towns in our region. And they all look bucolic, many of them Rockwellian. But as we heard so articulately from Bill and Jennifer, we are struggling. The fabric of many of these communities is unraveling, and largely it's centered around housing and not having enough or a continuum of affordable housing for those who live and work in our communities. And as we've heard, housing is so critical, and something that always comes up is, well, if it's so critical and so important, why hasn't our Yankee ingenuity in this area been able to solve it? We solve so much in this area. And I think as we're going to find out, because it's damn difficult to build it. It is tough, and especially in small towns, to do it. And for the next 45 minutes, we're going to start with sharing obstacles. What makes small towns, and in particular the small towns in our region, unique? What are those obstacles and barriers that we all face and share in our areas? I think we really have to name those and look at them and then find out how do we get beyond them in our communities if we're truly going to build and sustain housing for all our people in this community. And then go into successes. And successes, there are many. And some brilliant, shining examples of developments in our region that have surpassed and somehow blasted those obstacles and built some beautiful developments in our region. But I think even more so is taking those successes and trying to find out where are the commonalities, where's the foundation we can build in so it's not just one beautiful project in Stockbridge or Sharon, but how do we build a sustainable foundation? As Barbara was talking about, this is a long-term process that we don't just build one and then all become exhausted as a community and then fold our tents for the next generation and then try again. How do we build that foundation so that we all can create sustainable housing for all of our populations for the generations to come? So what are those new models? What are those fabrics or foundations that we have to pull together? And before turning it over to the panel, I think as we talk about how difficult this is and how we need this, I think it's important to recognize that we are at an unbelievable point, at least in our lives. And in my professional career, I haven't seen the opportunities that we have right now. And I think we are going to look back at this next 10 years as really a golden area. We have the alignment of professionals throughout the government and at the local level that I've never seen before. At HUD, they're doing remarkable work. I've never seen the passion, commitment, and skills coming from an organization. It's taken a while, but over the last 3 years, they've gotten it. They've gotten what it takes to work with communities, whether it's an inner city with homeless or a rural town. We're not going to have that again for a long time, so let's take it when we have it. And fortunately, we have 3 state governors who also get it, who have put together and appointed folks in key positions in housing in their states that also get it and get what needs to be done. And then we have the regional folks that have always been there, like the Federal Home Loan Bank and Rural Development and others that are working yeoman's job to support our work. And at the local level, today is a testament of groups that really want to make this work. We're not going to have that much more funding going forward, but it is the opportunities are in aligning what we have, us working together, holding hands and making this happen. So I say that let's take this opportunity, which I think is a lifetime, to really create sustainable platforms for affordable housing. We got a wonderful panel here together of folks who are seasoned, successful, that really have shown how we can develop sustainable, affordable housing in our region. Starting off will be Elton Ogden, president of the Berkshire Housing Development Corporation. I think a real model of an organization that's shown how do you do it in a rural area a decade after decade. Be followed by Molly Wallahan, who's Deputy Director of the Women's Institute for Housing and Urban Development, another great nonprofit started in Boston, expanded throughout Massachusetts and Connecticut. It really gets the small town sensibilities and how to create collaborations and partners. Lee Davis, Vice Chairman of the Sharon Housing Authority, small housing authority, who really has blasted away barriers and created some phenomenal affordable housing in Sharon, Connecticut. And then to end it up is Blair Sebastian, Executive Director of the New York State Rural Housing Coalition, that has done yeoman's work forging an alliance of rural housing developers throughout New York State and coming up with some wonderful best practices. So thank you all, and Elton, I'll turn it over to you. And I'm sorry, we're running short of time, so we're going to have to keep the 5 minutes each.
Well, it's hard to really follow Bill, so it'll be good to keep it to 5 minutes. But thank you for having me to the Taconic Foundation and the work you're doing through Housing Us. I think it's fantastic, the amount of education and outreach you've done on the issue of affordable housing. It's so important to this region. So I am a little bit intimidated. We've got some real, very accomplished people in this room, and I'm just a guy that runs a little nonprofit in Berkshire County. But it is actually quite comforting to know that I have something in common with pretty much everybody in this hall, and that's the sense of responsibility to improve the quality of lives of the people around us in our communities, and the recognition that housing is a fundamental part of human and societal well-being. We've heard that touched on already today. Also, the understanding that it takes a lot of like-minded people and right resources to address this housing issue that we're facing. And last, I'm reassured to know that the theater is full of people who have share a lot of these same beliefs. So that makes me a little less nervous. A little bit about Berkshire Housing Development Corporation. We don't have much time. It's a 40-year-old mission-driven nonprofit that serves all of Berkshire County, and we've also done some work in neighboring towns in the adjoining states. We do affordable housing development, programming, we do property management, and community development. Our mission and our objectives are focused on just expanding opportunities, housing options for people. And we do that through pursuing aggressively, because you have to be aggressive in this business, the development, preservation of affordable housing, expanding rental assistance and homelessness prevention resources, increasing our portfolio of affordable housing that we manage, and importantly, trying to promote a seamless and comprehensive service delivery system to maximize access to the resources that we do have. Our work has encompassed all kinds of housing and community development, but I'll touch on housing. So the agency has developed 500 affordable rental homes and 110 homes for first-time home buyers. We've been doing homebuyer education through the Good Samaritan Home Ownership Program since 1992, a program that wouldn't have been possible without partners, local banks that were partners in this. We also do administer the Section 8 rental voucher program as a contractor to our state agency, Department of Housing and Community Development. And that's a program that is critical. It absolutely helps us assist some of the neediest people in our region. Through housing rehab programs in the small rural towns of Berkshire County, we've renovated roughly 1,100 homes in 26 counties, or rather 26 towns, including towns in southern Vermont. And we've used federal CDBG money as well as USDA money for those. It's an extremely valuable resource that unfortunately funding has really been cut for. We're running a very small program in Beckett, Massachusetts right now, where the average household income of the participants is under $19,000 a year. That's household income. And 1/3 of the participants have household income of less than $15,000 a year. And without exception, their home is their only asset. So if they lose their home, they've got nothing. Very important programs. We also operate the region's Housing Consumer Education Center in partnership with our local county housing authority. That's one-stop shopping for anybody with a housing question or problem. We serve homeless families, landlords, homeowners, people who want to become owners. Essentially, over 2,400 households a year got information, counseling, referrals through the HCEC, and close to 800 families who were at risk of becoming homeless had their housing stabilized through the HCEC. And then lastly, our management company, Berkshire Housing Services, oversees 23 properties throughout Berkshire County, encompassing about 660 residential units, and we have a small commercial portfolio. The profits from the management company support the nonprofit efforts, the rental development and the affordable housing development. That's the model. So now let me quickly jump to why we're here. Some of the obstacles that we face creating affordable housing in our rural area, in this rural region that we work in, is lack of scale. Our communities really don't accommodate, we can't do 100-unit projects, or even 60-unit projects tend to be too big for a lot of our small towns. Lack of public water and sewer, and distance from other services. Zoning barriers. A lot of our towns don't have zoning that allows clustering or multifamily development. Lack of development capacity. NIMBYism, we haven't talked about that, but it's alive and well and rears its head all the time. And then last but probably the biggest challenge is just the lack of money that we're able to put together. So because I'm supposed to keep it positive, and that's easy because developing affordable housing is a positive thing, I'll talk about what it takes to overcome them. I say have clear goals and make them known. Opportunities arise where you least expect it. Build relationships and trust. Be patient but persistent. Use professional development expertise and be opportunistic. So I don't know if there's a picture up there. Yeah, that picture, that building right there is kind of the example I'm going to use to talk around these ideas. This is located in Lee, Massachusetts. It's right on the main street, and it's we're just beginning construction on this. It will contain 16 units of rental, affordable housing, and 3 retail stores, and it will mark a major construction project and major piece of investment in the downtown. So I said have clear goals and make them known. This is an advantage of being an organization that's around for a long time. People know who we are and have a good idea of what we're trying to do. Many times we're approached or sought out by a landowner or a bank or another nonprofit with a project. This happened with this building right here. This was actually a situation where the owners of the building had their realtor call me because they were interested in selling it, and they wanted to see this as affordable housing, so it never hit the market. Build relationships and trust. This project wouldn't have happened without support from the town, the former owners, existing tenants, and Lee Bank, which is a local lender that right from day one said, we want to be your lender and we want to help you make it happen. We also had invaluable support from CDAC, which is a quasi-public lender in Massachusetts that came in early and gave us money to help do pre-development and to acquire the building from the owners. And also our state housing agency, Department of Housing and Community Development, even though this project didn't fit the profile of what they were building at the time, they recognized the value of the housing that it would provide, and they believed in the capacity of Berkshire Housing to get it done. So they hung in with us, and they eventually funded the project. Relationships and trust evolve, or can evolve, into effective partnering and collaboration, and that can leverage results. Multiple purchase and sale agreements. We had to go back to the owners 3 or 4 times and get extensions on on the purchase and sale agreements. And if they didn't trust us and believe that we were really genuine and had, we're going to pull this off in the end, we would have lost the building and it would have potentially been converted to condos or market rentals. Let's see, be patient and persistent. Anybody that's ever done this work knows you're never going to get anything done if you're not. We began this in 2008. I don't know what year it is now, 2012. Lots of obstacles, lots of resubmissions of rental or of funding applications, and a lot of rejections. So you have to keep your eye on the goal and think about that outcome, and if you do that, you're actually eventually going to get there. So patience and persistence. Again, you have to utilize professional development expertise, whether that's nonprofit or private developers. This project has 6 different funding sources, and they all have different requirements, different criteria. It's very complicated financing. We had very complicated code compliance issues to overcome, zoning approvals, and lastly, the lenders all want to see development capacity, and they want to have a proven track record. So if you don't partner with somebody who has those, you're not going to get the money to do the deal. Lastly, be opportunistic. I say position yourself to take advantage of development opportunities that arise. First, have development expertise, and that means identify if you don't have it internally, so you can quickly assess a potential project when that opportunity comes up. And secondly, have financial capacity identified, so you can gain site control and afford to pay for the pre-development costs. And then lastly, and I'll stop. This is a new one, but be honest and transparent in all the work that you do, because it will earn you a lot of forgiveness, and you will need it when you do affordable housing development. Thanks again for having me here.
Thank you, Elton. Molly, you want to be up next?
Thank you. Again, the same thanks to all who have brought this together today. Berkshire Taconic and Housing Us. And again, I'm Molly Wallahan. I am Deputy Director of the Women's Institute for Housing and Economic Development. And we are privileged to be working in 2 of the 3 states that are represented here, Massachusetts and Connecticut, as a regional nonprofit focused on building homes and opportunity in a range of communities from rural, urban to suburban. And what I love about being at these types of gatherings is that I look out and I see our current partners, I see past partners, I see the funders we're working with now, people who have helped us in the past, and it's great to be coming together to talk about these issues in this region right now. So I'll try not to be repetitive. Elton touched on so much of what we're trying to address here. When I'm thinking about what projects and what successes do we want to highlight here in this group, I think about what have we got done, and we've had some great successes in our smaller communities and in the rural areas so far that I do want to talk about with you. Just to reiterate some of what those challenges, though, are, and where we've had to be creative to work within the existing guidelines in the context of the funding that exists, are the smaller size projects that that accommodate or are appropriate for our communities. The infrastructure that may or may not exist with water and sewer in these areas. Really making sure that we have developments, and we've talked a lot about the capital side and actually building the projects, but making sure that we are creating homes and communities that are actually going to be successful, like Barbara alluded to, for many years to come. So making sure we have the operating subsidies in place as well. Some of that is vouchers, so there's some others, and depending on what state we're in, to make sure that those can happen also. And then having successful property management. And in the smaller areas, we have challenges in all these facets. What we do as an organization is we work with a lot of smaller communities and other nonprofits to help those groups meet their housing goals. And the first example I have, if you don't mind putting up here, is a small project that I thought would be great to talk about because it looks, it's a smaller community, not as small as the community we're in right now. It's Old Saybrook, Connecticut, and this is Ferry Crossing. But a smaller community and a smaller scale project that fit the needs of that particular community. And this was a partnership with a nonprofit that came together in Old Saybrook to really address the need around homelessness that they were seeing, but also affordability in this community that is a bit wealthier, and to try to bridge that gap. And so this was a grassroots effort by Hope Partnership to come together, and they reached out to us as the development professional to help them get this project done, and we actually partnered with them. That harkens back to a little bit about what Elton was saying about the funders really wanting to see a track record, expertise, etc. But our goal was to make this reality for Old Saybrook and for the Hope Partnership. And so here we have 16 units that provide housing for a range of incomes from 25 to 80% of area median income. And we also have 2 vouchers here working with HUD and the Veterans Administration, 2 units that are dedicated to veterans who are at homeless or at risk of homelessness as well. So this was quite a range of affordability in these 16 units in this particular community. What's interesting is when you look at the funding breakdown here that I have at the bottom of the screen, is the sources of the funding. And here is where we had to be creative about how are we going to do 16 units in this community. It doesn't really meet the standard requirements or guidelines that we typically have for some of our the LIHTC tax credit program, for example, which lends itself to larger projects. Here, the state of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development stepped in and said, yes, we agree that this is a important project in this community, and they came in and did a loan at a much higher level than they typically would on a project. You can see there they are 75% of this project to get it built. And then here we also have the Federal Home Loan Bank as our one of our partners and our funders in this project. And the Federal Home Loan Bank we go to again and again for these smaller projects because the funding, and this is in conjunction with Liberty Bank, really works well for the smaller projects. This particular project also is a good example because it looks at the zoning issues that Elton alluded to as well, to overcome the zoning challenges that we see in many of our communities in all of our states. In Connecticut, we have an incentive housing zone legislation that allows the communities to do an overlay district to increase the density appropriately for the community. And here at Ferry Crossing, this was one of the first ones that were done in the state. Lee Davies, who's going to speak shortly, is also one of the first in the state with the Sharon Housing Authority. Chris, you can go into the next one. Here is an example around preservation of housing. This is Lakeview Apartments in Lakeville, Connecticut, Salisbury, Connecticut, that we purchased in April of 2012. And here we worked with the local Initiative Support Corporation. They provided us an acquisition loan, to preserve this housing. LISC was also involved in Ferry Crossing as one of our pre-development funders. They provided us loans to do that project as well, and LISC has come in again and again as a source of funds for these smaller projects. Here these are 6 units of housing that were serving workforce individuals already, and we were asked to take a look at it to see if it was a property we'd be interested in a preservation opportunity to maintain the affordability into the future. And this actually meets our mission where we do direct development and we create new units, but a big part of our strategy and our goals are to make sure that we're looking at preservation of units as well. And now we're actually in a time in our history where we actually have expiring low-income housing tax credit projects coming out, and we've stepped into one of those projects as well in Massachusetts recently to preserve that housing. But this is an example of the preservation. So, Chrissy, go. I don't know if I mentioned the Women's Institute in our role as a regional developer. We were one of the early members of the Housing Us board, and we are proud of that and have worked with Housing Us to create an accessory apartment revolving loan fund program. And here we have a way to create not a large number of units, but units within our communities using our existing housing stock and providing a loan and opportunities for our homeowners to create a new accessory apartment dwelling, but use and also be able to fix up their own homes. And so we're using the existing housing stock. It fits in with the character of the community and the neighborhood already. It's already a zoned use and a zoned as allowable use. So we're not doing a lot of units with this program, but it's a way to create more units. And I think it's a pilot program that we're looking at here in this area. We've received 2 state tax credit allocations for the state of Connecticut, totaling $105,000 to grant loans to homeowners to create these apartments that will create affordable units. And we are looking at trying to create, making this a more like a defined program and a broader program that can reach across the state. And we'd like to look at this in Massachusetts as well. And the next one is actually my toss back to Lee, is Sharon Ridge. And here, looking at housing authorities, and this is something Barbara also touched on, and the opportunities with housing authorities and the existing stock and the existing units that are there, and what are the opportunities for expansion, for improvements, and how can we use that? And very often there's already a very committed group, as Lee is an example of, around a local group around making sure that those efforts happen. So how can we work with those groups to create opportunities around housing authorities? And I won't go into too much of the detail here, except because I don't want to take that from you. But I just wanted to point out here again, we have the funding sources where DECD has stepped in to be the bulk, the largest lender on this project. We also have the USDA here. And we have another state funding called STEEP funding, which is from the Office of Policy and Management, and it's a small town economic assistance program. So here, again, you see just multi-layers of funding that come together to make this expansion of the housing authority units happen. And there'll also be improvements in units as well. So these are just some examples of successes we've had, how we've used our current tools, and how we can build upon those.
It's a great segue over to Lee.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. What I want to talk about over the next 5 minutes is partnerships, because that's really has been why the Sharon Housing Authority has been so successful. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, in the late 1980s, key partnerships with the town government, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the town residents, DECD made affordable housing a reality for the town of Sharon. The Sharon Housing Authority Commission was established by the Board of Selectmen. The town gave the commission approximately 16 acres, and Planning and Zoning approved 11 building sites on those 16 acres. Those 16 acres also had access to town sewer, which is really critical. The town residents approved our build out at a town meeting. The DEC provided a grant and a mortgage to us. And so 5 buildings were created with 20 apartments, which is called Sharon Ridge. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, now 20 years later, we look to expand Sharon Ridge, and partnerships, again, are key to making this happen, and really over 3 different phases. These partnerships really are with LIS, CHAFA, the DECD, the USDA, the town government, especially planning and zoning, our community and business leaders, the Women's Institute, Viking Construction, and Pink & Company. So the first phase is what I really call technical assistance. And that phase, we worked with Leslie Higgins-Biddle from LIS. I don't know if you know Leslie. I think many of you do. She's an amazing woman. And what Leslie did was she helped re-educate the board. We hadn't done this in 20 years, and so she worked with us to address our concerns, and she worked with us to really lay out a feasibility and pre-development plans and timeline. So the second phase is what I call the feasibility phase, or the managed by fact phase. And what we did was we utilized all available data in order to create our plan and to market and sell our plan. And the most important partnerships during this part of our development was with the Board of Selectmen in Planning and Zoning, you know, really getting their buy-in and their support. Community and business leaders, where we interviewed 30 of them in face-to-face surveys to get their feedback, what they thought we needed. And then we put all that together as the housing authority and came up with that we would build 3 more buildings with 12 units. So now let's go to the next slide, which is really the 3rd phase, which is the pre-development phase. And again, this is all about key partnerships. First was getting the initial buy-in from CHAFA and the DECD. We went to meet with them. We made a formal presentation, again, based on all the information we put together. We hired a development consultant, and this was really key. And as I like to say, we really struck gold here because we hired the Women's Institute. And I worked constantly with Ellen Flanagan and Katie Schaefer from the Women's Institute, and they are just 2 amazing women. They have guided us and worked with us through all the pre-development budgeting and funding, through hiring the right architect for us, helping us attain planning and zoning, the water and sewer, the Connecticut Department of Health approvals. A big nut was obtaining $4.3 million from 3 sources, as Molly said, to build the 12 units we want to build. Selecting Viking Construction to do the building for us, and Pink & Company to be the management company for the Sharon Housing Authority as we move forward with this. So now where we are at this is really doing the financial closing and starting construction, which we plan to do in the fall. So the next slide. Now also, you know, we have 20 units, so it's very important also to remember that we have 50 people residing in the current complex at Sharon Ridge. And so again, partnerships came into play so they don't feel left out. So we worked again with the Women's Institute, and through the DECD, we've obtained $677,000 through the state-sponsored Housing Portfolio Fund. That's a $300 million fund, and the first $30 million has been spent, and we're lucky to be one of those recipients. And then also we're partnering with Connecticut Light and Power. They have given us over $110,000 to do energy-efficient upgrades to the current complex at Sharon Ridge. So all of this, both the current complex and the expansion project that we're doing right in the middle of right now, all of this is all built on having strong partnerships.
Thank you, Lee. Leave it up to Larry.
Thank you. I'd like to also thank Jennifer and Bill and the Berkshire Taconic Foundation for, one, inviting us here and for convening this conversation. This is really important stuff, and it's just wonderful that you all are engaged as you are. Adding cleanup at a panel like this is always a bit of a crapshoot. It's my excuse for not coming tightly scripted, because had I come tightly scripted, everything I was going to say would have been said. And this kind of gives me the opportunity to sort of react a little bit to what I've heard. You know, the several themes that are recurrent in this conversation about the challenges of doing affordable housing, community development work in small communities. They are indeed challenges, but they don't have to be. We very often talk about the lack of scale, or at least a discussion of the scale of the work that we do is not the scale that many investors and funders want to see. We speak of the lack of development capacity. It's true that, well, it might be true that small rural communities have access to less sophisticated development capacity than our urban brethren, although folks on this panel sort of disprove that alleged drawback. The lack of appropriate resources. Again, this is a political conversation. I guess that I'll get to this piece now. If I remember high school civics right, politics is about the allocation of limited resources. And that's what we struggle with in rural communities. We are, for the most part, and I think that's true in all 3 states that are involved here, we're urban-centric states, Political power resides in urban places, and while we are not without very sophisticated, savvy political representation, numbers kind of work against us. So those of us who work in rural communities and deal with these kinds of issues have to really be cognizant of the fact that this is, among a lot of other things, a political challenge. The lack of scale, the lack of development capacity, the lack of available resources. That isn't because we're completely lacking those things. It's because they are allocated, they are limited, they are insufficient to meet all needs, and they are often allocated elsewhere. So we, those of us who are concerned about the things that have been talked about here today really have to be cognizant of the politics of all this and how resources get allocated to communities. The HUD requires that communities, that municipalities, state agencies, states and municipalities that administer HUD funds directly have a consolidated plan. This is a document that lays out a 5-year, it includes a needs assessment, an attempt to understand the needs in all of the communities within that jurisdiction, whether it's a state or a municipal county, and develop a 5-year plan to address those. That's a public conversation, and it is about the allocation of resources. And you need to be at the table when the jurisdiction who handles particularly block grant money is working out this 5-year plan. And then there's also an annual action plan, which is that 12-month strategic plan. This is how we're going to allocate our resources in this 12-month cycle. And those are public conversations. There are public hearings. There are always opportunities to engage the people who are writing these plans. You need to be at those tables, and you need to be standing up for the needs of your community. Just because you lack scale doesn't mean you shouldn't have access to resources. One of the challenges that we all have here is that, as Barbara mentioned earlier and as others have mentioned, the federal low-income housing tax credit is the principal resource that underwrites the development of affordable rental housing these days. It's created, as Barbara said, 1.8 million units, created millions and millions of jobs. But it's a single tool, and it's a tool that sort of absorbs the attention of all the other tools. We find in our own state in New York, so many of our resources are directed towards leveraging out the federal low-income housing tax credit. And again, this is, as Bill mentioned in the very beginning, at the heart of this is a supply and demand issue. If there were a sufficient supply of appropriate housing, we would have appropriate housing in all cost range, in all price ranges, and this would not be an issue. We need a broader array of tools, and we need tools that are more appropriate for the kind of development we do. Rural rental housing used to be perhaps the vulnerability of the single tool that comes with the USDA rural development, although there'll always be farmers home to me. Section 515 rural rental housing program was the single biggest producer of rental housing in our communities for a generation. That program is mostly gone, and it leaves us without a really valuable tool. The other thing that I'd like to touch real quick, and David, I haven't a clock, and if there's one on the back wall, I can't see it from here. But give me the, okay. Our state, legislators in our state who were interested in this issue back in the late 70s noted that there were a large cadre of community-based not-for-profit organizations out there attempting to do affordable housing and community development work. But what they noticed was these organizations, one, were capacity challenged. They really didn't have very often, not always, but very often didn't have sufficient capacity to really do this kind of work. And they didn't have that sort of stable source of funding that allows you to undertake the multi-year endeavors, which every affordable housing development is years, if not sometimes decades. Their answer to that was to provide a stream of organizational funding, organizational support to a cadre of not-for-profits that allow them to grow their capacity to sort of stabilize their organizations and to provide kind of, not really seed money, but the organizational capacity to identify projects and sort of move them forward. Several years later, early 80s or just about 1980, those same legislators, that portion of those who were working in rural upstate communities, looked at this, what became the Neighborhood Preservation Program, and said, this model is really cool and it does work. These folks are producing housing now, but that the model, this neighborhood model, really isn't appropriate for diffuse, widely scattered rural communities like the ones we serve, and hence they formed what's called the Rural Preservation Company program. 30 years later, those programs still exist. They're somewhat smaller than they once were. They face funding challenges every year, the allocation of finite resources. It's a challenge to keep them in business. But some of these folks. The Housing Resources of Columbia County, I believe, was one of the Housing Us founding organizations. Rural Ulster Preservation Company over in Ulster County, Hudson River Housing in Newburgh, Community Services Program down in Beacon. These are participants in this state program that provide a huge amount of capacity. My point here is that affordable housing, so much of affordable housing, the low-income housing tax credit world notwithstanding, is not a profitable sort of world. It's an important community endeavor, but it ain't no way to make money. So it's a perfect place for not-for-profits. And if you can find ways to invest and support the kinds of not-for-profit work that you have on this panel, you'll go a long ways towards moving these issues. And again, you do have to stay engaged in as distasteful sometimes as it is to be engaged in conversations. Rural communities will never see their fair share of resources without pushy, assertive rural people. So don't do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Blair, and all of the panelists. I mean, those were very thought-provocative thoughts and comments. And I think it's going to be a great segue to the next panel after we take a short break, which is going to be putting the financing agencies and funders on the panel to really address these issues. Since we are tight for time, what we're going to do is have people take questions and answers around the short break we have, which will be about 15 or 20 minutes. So do buttonhole, folks, and ask your questions then. Just as before we break, just a quick, I wanted to shout out to a few agencies that are here. There's a number here, but Jocelyn Ayer, who's the program director for Housing Us, is here. Leslie Higgins-Biddle from LISC is here, and Tim Geller, who's the executive director of the CDC of South Berkshire, and he'll be here to mingle with you also. But thank you all for this wonderful panel. And we'll be back about 15 minutes.
I hope you've enjoyed the program so far. I certainly have. And once again, I'm Bill Dunleavy, and I'm pleased to be back with you to moderate this panel discussion, Funding Opportunities, New Ideas and Innovative Strategies, Programs and Strategies for Small Towns in their efforts to create more affordable housing options. We have assembled a terrific panel to help us explore the topic. I would like to introduce each of them briefly, and then they will each make a brief presentation. That will be followed by a question and answer session in which we encourage your participation. Susan Elliott is Executive Vice President and Chief Business Officer of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston. Her 30-year career with the FHLB has been devoted to assisting banks to meet affordable housing and community development needs throughout New England. Jay Healy is Director of Rural Development for the United States Department of Agriculture for the states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. He has been instrumental in the protection and preservation of farmlands and the promotion of farm and food products. Aaron Gornstein is the Undersecretary of the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. He administers nearly $1 billion in state and federal funds for a variety of programs for affordable housing, production, community development, municipal assistance, local and regional planning, energy conservation, rental assistance, and public housing. Nick London is Director of the Office of Community Development for Connecticut, Department of Community, Economic and Community Development. And Matthew Nelson is the President of the New York State Office of Community Renewal, New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And we're going to ask the panel, as I said, to each make a brief presentation. I really hope that we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers and discussions, and we'll begin with Susan Elliott.
Hello everyone, I have a question for you. How many of you, and I know some of you have, but how many of you have really ever heard of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston? Well, that's good. But because I really do like to tell my favorite story, I'll be really quick. But I was organizing a meeting for the bank. This goes back almost 30 years. I was in Connecticut. I was the one that had to go get the meeting organized, so I showed up the day before, and I went to the hotel and said, I'm here for the meeting. I just want to see the room. Fine. So I was looking, and she said, Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston? There's no meeting here tomorrow. I said, really? I've got 80 people coming. I'm thinking, where am I going to take them? What am I going to do? So we're back and forth, and I turned around, and this is absolutely true. The marquee said, tomorrow's events, Funeral Home Loan Bank. I think I discovered it. So we are not the Funeral Home Loan Bank, we are the Federal Home Loan Bank. And life goes on. So just a little bit about who we are. We've been around for about 80 years, charged with providing economical housing finance, and I think we've been doing that quite well that whole time. We are a cooperative, so we are owned by our members and our shareholders. They're one and the same group. There are 7,700 roughly institutions across the country. These are banks, credit unions, insurance companies, savings banks, cooperative banks here in Massachusetts that can belong to, and community development financial institutions can now be members. So they're counted amongst that group. The system, Federal Home Loan Bank system, 12 banks around the country have about $760 billion in assets. That was over $1 trillion at one point. Over $400 billion in advances outstanding. Those are the loans that we make to our member institutions. So we raise money in the nation's capital markets, just like the Treasury does, but we're agencies, so we have slightly higher spread, but not much. And the debt that we issue is joint and several liability amongst the 12 federal home loan banks. And like lots of us in the room, we are regulated, and our regulator is the Federal Housing Finance Agency, who also regulates Fannie and Freddie, so they're a little distracted doing that, although we did just have 30 of them for 6 weeks in our offices. So this is what the Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston's membership profile looks like. We have about 461 members across the 6 New England states. Today we're focusing more on Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York. And P.S., the New York Federal Home Loan Bank has 203 member institutions in the state of New York, so there's plenty of opportunity to tap them as well for some of the programs that I'm going to describe. And that's what the Federal Home Loan Bank system looks like, and I'm not going to spend any time on that. So what we do, highly reliable wholesale funding, provision of that and liquidity is really our mission. We're supporting residential mortgages, community development lending, and a big part of that is affordable housing finance. Our core business is this lending that we call advances. We are a secured lender. We've never taken a credit loss in the history of the bank, almost 80 years. I remember financial institutions will tell you, yes, we are very secured. Phil will remember that. We also do buy mortgages from banks, similar to what Fannie and Freddie do, but on a much smaller scale. And it's a really great model of the skin in the game that people are talking about. If institutions that are making the mortgages keep a little of the credit risk, our performance of this portfolio is 1/3 of the national average in terms of delinquencies. It's been outstanding. But what I really want to talk to you about today is the programs that we have that you could use to provide and fund affordable housing. Our key program that many of you are probably aware of is our Affordable Housing Program. David Rich serves on our advisory council, and I learned that Blair Sebastians, that was up in the panel just a moment ago, serves on the advisory council of the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York.
These folks really help guide how the affordable housing programs are administered in each of the districts here in New England and also with Blair and New York. So these are grants and subsidies that can reduce interest rates to zero, which they almost are now anyway, to finance affordable housing for the very lowest income populations we've been talking about, up to moderate income. The federal home loan banks, all of us, take 10% of our income each year to help fund the AHP, as we call it. The Federal Home Loan Bank of Boston has just under $14 million available this year, and the funding round doesn't end until a week from Friday. So if you're thinking about an initiative, let's talk about it. Be quick to get it in, but it could still happen. There's lots of lenders around that have experience. I've actually brought a list with me of many rural initiatives that have been funded through the Affordable Housing Program. I'm going to talk quickly about 2 examples in a minute, but I've got a list. It also has the banks that have been supporting these, and there are lots of great lenders, especially in this area that we're talking about today. So our funds are still available for the New York Federal Home Loan Bank. They ran their Affordable Housing Program round earlier this year, which means you can get ready and be there in early 2013. Lots of great and different uses for the AHP, which I won't go into in too much detail. One of the things that actually David Rich had asked me to touch on is something that we did last year, was a study about what we thought was the multiplier effect. And not that it's only our affordable housing program that has a multiplier effect on the economy, but as Barbara mentioned, we're talking about housing, but we're also talking about economic development as well. And through this study, we found that for every $1 million of affordable housing program dollars that goes into housing, $14.2 million of housing is built or rehabilitated. And taking that one step further, there is a catalytic effect for the economic activity that results. And we found that for every $1 million of the affordable housing program, $27.6 million in economic benefit is derived. And if you put that together with the affordable housing program dollars that have gone out into New England over the past 20 plus years, just under $200 million, that's created or rehabilitated $2.78 billion of housing. It had an economic benefit of $5.4 billion. So as I think we're just preaching to the choir amongst ourselves here today, but as we talk to others, it's not just about housing. It's really important, of course, to have that housing, decent, safe, affordable places for people to live, but it also helps drive economies, whether it's urban, suburban, or rural. A couple of quick examples, and Bill, I think this is just as adorable as it is affordable. Right here on Hillside Avenue, Great Barrington, Pittsfield Cooperative Bank and teamed up with the Community Development Corporation of South Berkshire to put together this 10-unit, 1 to 3 bedroom rental property. The total development cost, $2.4 million. Our affordable housing program dollars are, I would say, almost never the largest source of funding, but often we're first in. So if you need a place to go to try to say, okay, let me get that first commitment of funding, the affordable housing program is the way to go. But just under $200,000 of subsidy went into this through the AHP, and then there was a loan that was provided, permanent loan provided by Pittsfield Cooperative Bank that was subsidized through the affordable housing program as well. And the major funders, as you can see, were Home and the Mass Housing Trust Fund. And then in Connecticut, South Common, 24-unit rental development, 1 to 3 bedrooms. Community Builders, which is all over the place, Kent Affordable Housing, worked with our member financial institution, Union Savings Bank, which is in Danbury, Connecticut. I keep referring to these financial institutions because anything that you would do, any of these fundings that you would use from the Federal Home Loan Bank must go through one of our member financial institutions, so that is really key. In this case, there was quite a bit of AHP subsidy that went into this, and Union Savings Bank did make the permanent loan and used some of the AHP to subsidize the interest rate. And this was a low-income housing tax credit initiative. So in addition to the affordable housing program, we have something called the Equity Builder program. We take part of that 10% of our income, we take actually 15% of it, and we set it aside for direct home buyer assistance. And as you can see here, up to $10,000 can be used. This usually goes directly from a member financial institution to a home buyer that they're providing a mortgage to, so they can use that to help the home buyer pay the down payment, pay the closing costs, or other such costs. It works in conjunction with a number of different programs that are out there. Three things that need to go into the Equity Builder for a member financial institution to be successful in applying for it is that they have to have some concessions. The bank itself has to have some concession as a part of that. There is income eligibility, and there is a requirement that the prospective home buyer do go through counseling. We had about $1.5 million, I think, available this year. We're still dispersing it. I think we have about $300,000 left. So I'd be happy to help you find a member institution that's been approved to participate in the Equity Builder program this year. We've already allocated the funding, but then we go out on a first-come, first-served basis as home buyers are ready to buy their homes. Next are our community development advance programs. These are available all the time. They are our lowest cost advances or loans that we make to our member financial institutions. They can be used for both affordable housing and community economic development. And we go out to 30 years with this type of funding. Typically it's more like 10, 15, 20-year funding, but a great resource for our member financial institutions to work with various initiatives throughout New England. Just wanted to show you a little bit about what's been accomplished over the years in these three programs I've described. And just looking at the total number of housing units that our community development program has supported, just about 86,000 housing units, AHP units, over the 20 years, 23,000 of them throughout New England. And the Equity Builder program, which is not quite so old, it was just became available in 2003, and just over 1,500 homeowners have been helped to purchasing their first home or a new home. And the final piece I wanted to cover today was something we're trying for the first time with our affordable housing program. And I was just speaking with Molly, it looks like we may have a few applications coming in this time, is allowing the affordable housing program dollars to go out to CDFIs or any kind of loan fund and then be reused over and over again instead of them having to reapply. Well, another federal home loan bank tried this and was not so successful, but we think we've got it worked out that this can be used, and it's something I would encourage you all to talk with us about. Certainly between now and next Friday may be a little too quick of a turnaround for the revolving loan fund, but we're going to try this and see if we can't help, particularly rural kinds of lending where and rental lending where the funds could be used over and over again for similar properties. So we're very excited to be able to offer that. So as I conclude, I want to remind you I have this list. I'd be happy to give it to you. It has great examples, a quick synopsis of the kinds of projects that have been funded, and it gives you a sense for who the organizations were that were involved. And also has some copies of this Results magazine that we produce, and has also some really good examples. In this case, there's an example of some veterans housing among some others in here. So I thank you, and I will turn the program over to Jay.
Thank you. I have a question for you as well. How many of you are wondering what in the world the U.S. Department of Agriculture is doing here today? Yeah, I wonder too sometimes. I wonder if I ought to be over the line checking out pork bellies or something. But it is very confusing. As Blair, I think, alluded to, our agency used to be Farmers Home. We have over 45 programs that we administer. With the stimulus money a couple of years ago, we spent over $600 million in the three-state region. And I'm always amazed. I'm a Schedule C, I'm a political appointee, so I've only been around for 3 or 4 years, but we're a fairly well-kept secret, and I will get to the housing programs we have, but I did want to mention, we had the pleasure this morning of meeting with some folks in a useful meeting in Williamstown who are trying to help with some folks that have been displaced by the hurricane up there. And we came down, and if you went by the community health program there, that was something that was facilitated and funded. The health center here in Barrington, the fire district in town, the pipes that went in, we helped fund the infrastructure there. We're working on a Montessori school and helping fund that, I think, up in Lenox. And there's an awful lot of stuff that we get involved with. But our programs in housing, I'll go over them briefly and won't bore you too much, hopefully. We have a lot of information we're going to leave outside, but one thing I do want to mention, I want to introduce Len Schustak. Will you stand up, Len? Len is our local area director for rural development in the Berkshire region. We used to have an office over here, we don't anymore. We'd like to do more business here, but I think one of the advantages and one of the things I'm asking sitting here, I'm from a town of less than 1,000, and I can't speak for you, but I'd be wondering, how do you deal with all these acronyms? How do you deal with all these programs and figure out how to put something together in a rural area where you don't have much infrastructure or help? And get in touch with the Len Schustaks of the world. We're one of the few agencies that does have still a local presence. We have some folks over the line who dealt with Susan Gregoire or Mary Grasso in our office in Windsor. They can be helpful. They can come out. They can work with you on an ongoing basis. And that's a real big suggestion I would make in terms of how maybe you can help your individual communities. As I said, we are a well-kept secret. We do a lot of loan guarantees. We come in behind a bank. So if you read anything in the paper, there might be a reference to USDA, but there's almost never a reference to rural development. And we have a lot of good news. We have a lot of good programs. In Massachusetts this year, we spent over $200 million with helping with homeowners, both 502 programs, 504, some 515 work. The 502 program is one mostly a loan guarantee, although we also have a direct program, and there's no down payment required, so it's 100% financing. And it's really helpful to new homeowners. There are strict credit requirements, and for the naysayers who say, well, why is government handing some of these programs out? Our foreclosures and our delinquencies are well under 5%, and it's really a good program, especially for young people and people who are getting into the housing market. We have self-help technical assistance grants that are available for nonprofits. We have sweat equity components that are sometimes useful in the 502 direct section program, but the Section 515, as Barbara alluded to, our multifamily program, almost all the funds are being used for rehab or fixing up the housing stock, as everybody's referred to, is 25, 30 years old. So we have very little money for new housing stock under the 515 program. But I did want to mention our community facilities program, which can be helpful for not-for-profits or for housing agencies. And this year, in that program in Massachusetts, we spent over $50 million of low-interest subsidized loans to help with infrastructure, to help with schools, to help with water and sewer, not-for-profits, a lot of cultural institutions. And I think that's part of what we need to do in this era of having a lot less resources coming down from the federal government. Or our resources are coming almost always now in terms of a guarantee or something that helps to be assistance to people, but grants are few and far between. So dealing with us is a little bit like a lunar docking mechanism, maybe figuring out how to put it all together. Other people might say it's like chutes and ladders. You got to be persistent. You're up there and then you're back down 5 steps back. But we have a lot of things that can help people out, and $300 or $400 million a year in just in housing in these 3 state regions that I represent is not chicken feed. It's something that's useful for a lot of people and a lot of homeowners, and please get in touch with us. We would like to have better relationships. We used to have an office in Pittsfield. We don't anymore. Some of the banks that are underwriters here that were mentioned earlier, we did business with people 10, 15 years ago at Farmers Home. We don't have the same relationships anymore, and we'd like to figure out how to come back to a group like this, but come back in terms of how do we drill down, how do we help specifically the Williamstowns of the world, or the Great Barringtons, or the Sheffields for particular problems, because there's no question they need to be done with a partnership. They need to be done not only with banks and builders and state and federal agencies, but they need to be done, as we referred to, with the Ben Downings of the world, or the Paul Marks of the world, the local elected officials, the federal elected officials. They all have staff. They're all really helpful. And don't forget those people as you try to put together a partnership. I've got names and numbers for the Mary Grasso and Len Shustak here, and the people over in Middleton, New York. There's a local office for RD there as well. And I would urge you to get back in touch with us on ongoing projects you're working on, because we don't just work in Boston or work in New York City. We are local. We used to have 120 people in our agency just a few years ago. When I moved in 3 or 4 years ago, we had almost 70. We're down to 50, but we still have people that can help, and people that can come to your town office buildings or to your housing agencies morning, noon, or night and try to help out and figure out how you take some of this good information today and move it into some specific projects that will really help people with something that's very, very important, how we house our people and provide more affordable housing. We have a hard time in this region. Our limits are $230,000. Well, I mean, how many houses in the lower Berkshires can you take a look at for that? And we have other limits in terms of whether you're in a rural area or not. Some people don't think that some of our towns are rural enough to get assistance through our agency. But we're here, we're ready to help, and please don't laugh too much when we say we're here representing the federal government, but we're here to help. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about what's going on in Massachusetts at the state level. And fortunately, it's much better news than what Barbara is really able to provide at the federal level in the last year or so. There's just tremendous progress from the Obama administration in the first few years at HUD, and Barbara has brought such energy to the department that we have a strong federal partner within HUD. It's Congress is not providing the adequate funding that we need. But fortunately, in Massachusetts, we enjoy tremendous support from the governor and the legislature for affordable housing. We spend over $400 million a year in direct subsidy for the production and preservation of affordable rental housing, as well as providing a range of different housing services and rental assistance for low-income households. And that excludes the $140 million we spend on emergency shelter each year to make sure there's a safety net for both families and individuals in terms of the shelter system. So it's a privilege to work in the administration and really be able to advocate for affordable housing. And there are some new things on the horizon that I wanted to share with you. And I also want to assure you that the Western Mass delegation is actively involved in the department's activities. I hear on a regular basis, which is a great thing, about specific projects they're interested in and different initiatives, and whether it's CDBG or a specific affordable housing project. So you have a very active delegation, which we greatly appreciate and want to work closely with going forward. Some of the initiatives, we were able to get $20 million in additional funding for the most recent rental round that we announced back earlier this year, and that made up partially, at least, for the sharp cuts to the federal home program. We're going to get an additional $20 million for the upcoming round as well. The governor has allocated those funds, and as well as the legislature in terms of the state local housing tax credit. So we're going to have a robust rental round again. The proposals are due October 5th. This is the first time we've done a pre-application process. Some of you, I'm sure, went through that. I hope it went well. We received 92 total applications. 62 of those will be in the fall rental round. And so we'll be making announcements on those awards hopefully in January. The second initiative I wanted to mention is on supportive housing. We're gearing up to launch an initiative to create 1,000 units of supportive housing over the next 3 years. This is housing plus services. You heard from the Deputy Director of the Women's Institute. They've certainly been working on this model for many years, Corporation for Supportive Housing. This is not unfamiliar to Connecticut. In fact, we had a field trip down to Connecticut. I didn't go, but many of our state agency officials, to learn about their supportive housing initiative, which has been going on for many years, very, very successful. We're going to be signing a joint memorandum of understanding with 18 different state agencies around the supportive housing initiative, from the Department of Corrections to all the EOHHS agencies, veterans, you name it. And as a down payment on that initiative, which will start in January, we are funding up to 150 units of project-based rental assistance under what's called the Mass Rental Voucher Program. That request for responses went out 2 days ago, so I encourage the developers of supportive housing to come in with your proposal quickly. We want to fund 150 units and get those online as quickly as possible. For the first time, what we're doing is bringing together the capital subsidies, the project-based rental assistance under MRVP, and service coordination dollars all in one package. We are funding up to $2,500 a unit for services in those developments. I've learned there's really no such thing as one-stop shopping, but it's hopefully going to be pretty close to that on supportive housing. So that's going to be, that's moving forward as we speak, and we're going to be ramping up on that initiative in the coming year or two. The third area I wanted to mention is on homeless prevention and rapid rehousing. We are now committing $80 million. We're trying to reorient the shelter system to focus on diversion, rapid rehousing, as well as prevention. So we have the new RAFT program, and Berkshire Housing Development Corporation is administering that, as well as the home-based program. Berkshire Housing Regional Authority is also very active in many of our programs, and we're really focusing on homeless prevention in the coming years. The fourth area is a new program for building the capacity of community development corporations and nonprofits. The legislature appropriated $1.5 million as part of the jobs bill in July. We'll be getting that program up and running later this year. This will also become a tax credit program in subsequent years. It's going to be a very interesting model. Again, I believe the Mass Association of CDCs look closely at Connecticut for that one as well, but we do have a new program to support the capacity of nonprofit organizations developing housing, as well as doing small business development and economic development. So we're looking forward to running that program and starting to plan for it now. We've created an advisory group that's getting together next month. I encourage those who are not certified CDCs to come in and do that. To be eligible under the statute, you must be a certified CDC, which is a relatively new process in Massachusetts. We've already certified about 27 CDCs, and there's 9 pending at our office now. The next area I wanted to talk about, and it's been mentioned on foreclosed properties, because it is an opportunity, particularly for the small rural communities, on some of the smaller properties. And we are, fortunately, with the support of the Attorney General of Massachusetts, has done a tremendous job on foreclosure, and with the use of the settlement funds to continue our Neighborhood Stabilization Loan Fund, which has been working with nonprofits and for-profits to acquire and renovate REO property. We're going to be continuing that for the next year, at least through this new funding through the Mass Housing Investment Corporation and Mass Housing Partnership. The final piece on new initiatives and resources I've mentioned is something called the Housing Development Incentive Program. We launched that program in June. It's for a tax credit for mostly market rate housing in gateway cities. In Massachusetts, there's 23, I believe, or 24 gateway cities. Very excited that the city of Pittsfield came in first of all the applications to create a zone, which you have to do first. And then there's a developer who's come in with a proposal for a project in downtown as part of the Arts District. It's going to be an exciting project. We're looking forward to that and an announcement soon, so stay tuned. Pittsfield, I believe, will be the first on the Housing Development Incentive Program. Congratulations, Western Mass, on that. So those are some of the new resources, and there's many others that I can't get into and don't have the time, but suffice it to say, we're aggressively moving forward on an affordable housing agenda in Massachusetts, continuing to work with the federal government, as I mentioned, and our partners at HUD and USDA. Finishing up on strategies for rural communities and my thoughts on that. I mentioned three things. First, we have to have a willingness to fund small-scale projects, and we define that as 500 units, or no, I'm just kidding. That would be 30 units, 25 units, 10 units, 5 units. Whether it's Hillside Avenue, Pine Woods, you've heard about. There's the Crossing Village in Lee, the Mansfield Vets project. All these are small scale. We're going to continue to fund small scale rental housing in the rural areas. That's what we must do. It's sometimes hard. It's hard to build. It's hard to build 10 units as 100 units. I understand that, but we're going to continue that. And the little secret is, we'll fund anything that Bill Breitbart tells me to fund. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Actually, I just want to say that having CDAC, the Community Economic Development Assistance Corporation, provide the technical assistance, the pre-development, is something most other states don't have. We don't take it for granted in Massachusetts. And it's people like Bill that are working with the nonprofits to help them through and navigate the system, provide the TA and pre-development funding. And Bill, believe me, represents Western Mass so well at CDAC, and I'm the chair of the CDAC board, and he makes his presentations and makes the case of why we need to fund a small-scale project. This is what it is out in these towns, and it's sometimes there's that Boston bias, I'm sure you've heard about it, that we need to really think of it differently. Think about density differently as well, and what that means. When we think about smart growth, what does it mean for the rural communities? Very different, obviously, than the urban areas. The second strategy or theme, I think, is making sure that we're supporting the existing delivery system, the existing infrastructure, whether it's the nonprofit organizations, of which we have many great ones here in this region that we work closely with and will continue to fund, the local housing authorities, the CDCs, the regional housing agencies, to make sure that we're providing the support we need so they can deliver the best product. And again, it's tough to do that work. There's not a lot of staffing. Sometimes it feels like you don't have enough support, but hopefully you won't be bashful about calling me when you need that kind of help, and I'll just send Bill out to meet with you. But in all seriousness, we have to continue to bolster that sector, and also, obviously work with the private sector and how important the lending community is out in this area, really across the state, in investing in affordable housing developments, and investing in the low-income housing tax credit program and the state credit. We couldn't do any of these developments, I don't think, without the private sector, whether it's the banks, syndicators, but also private for-profit developers as well. So keeping everyone in the game and providing the support we need to the existing delivery system is my main point. And then just to finish up, which I think is equally important, if not the most, is the active involvement and support from the municipality. So obviously, all housing is local, and so whether this is town-owned land and providing that, whether it's flexible zoning, people have mentioned that early in the panel, And it's never easy, so the municipal support and leadership is absolutely essential on every affordable housing development that I've been aware of. And the Community Preservation Act has been a godsend for Massachusetts and for this region to be able to provide direct funding to affordable housing to the local groups, locally raised revenue through the CPA. And fortunately, the legislature has bolstered the state match by some $20 million to continue the CPA in an active way. So I think we're going to see more towns. We have, I think, well over 150, I think it's 153 municipalities participating in CPA. There is now a vibrant matching program at the state level, which started out the first 5 years 100% match, but the legislature stepped up in a significant way. We also got some important technical changes to CPA that all, I think, benefit the cities and towns as well. So those are some of the strategies and some of the resources we have in Massachusetts. And again, thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to working with everyone going forward.
Thank you, Aaron. Now we have Nick.
Thank you, and I want to add my thanks to the Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation for inviting me here for a couple of reasons. One is because this is a very exciting time in Connecticut for affordable housing. It's been an enormously busy time. I joined DCD as the director of the Office of Housing and Community Development about 5 months ago. And this has been an extremely busy 5 months. And this is the first chance I've had to come actually out to this region and take a look at some of the projects that we've been involved in. Actually, I think within a few weeks of joining, I was out in Kent for the groundbreaking of the Stewart Farms Apartments project, which is a great project and one that we're very proud of and would love to see more of. But since then, I haven't been able to come back to see some of the projects that we've invested in Cornwall and North Canaan, Salisbury. So this has been a great opportunity. It also happens to be one of my favorite places in the world. So it's a great chance to come up here. Like I said, I've been incredibly busy since joining DECD, and but when you think about tackling an enormous need for affordable housing, busy is good, and that's the way we look at it. The busyness here in Connecticut is really a function of the administration and the legislature that has undertaken an extraordinary change in its approach to affordable housing, prioritizing it not simply as affordable housing, but, and this is one of the themes that people have talked about throughout the day, is that thinking about affordable housing in connection with economic development. Let's see if this works. I've been warned that if I press the wrong button, we all explode. So hopefully I don't do that. But so thinking about affordable housing in connection with economic development. And to some extent that people may find that to be obvious. Affordable housing construction means jobs, it means tax revenues, it means, and sometimes the analysis doesn't go any further than that. But affordable housing development also means stronger communities. It can mean, stronger communities can mean the communities that are better able to attract and retain businesses. That's tax revenues. That's retention of people, of brain power, of ideas, further businesses, further tax revenues, further jobs. It means stabilizing communities, households, and avoiding costly alternatives to social problems. So from our perspective, and as the governor of Connecticut has repeatedly said, affordable housing development isn't just the right thing to do. It clearly is the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do. I was on the phone with somebody from the press recently, asking the question, why is it that Connecticut And in this, Connecticut is just like Massachusetts and New York, but almost no other state. Why is it that Connecticut would invest the dollars that it invested in affordable housing? And the question seemed odd to me because it seems obvious, and the question actually seems to be something that you need to turn on its face. Why would you miss an opportunity to take advantage of a win-win-win opportunity like this? But it's it only works as a win-win-win if what you're doing is developing affordable housing that works. And there's a lot that's bound up in that. But what it really boils down to in the end is creating great places to live. That's a simple way of putting it, but I don't think it's simple, and anybody here who's been involved in development preservation will immediately understand that the details are much harder than that. When you're thinking about this from the perspective of the state, the town, housing authorities, developers, what you're really trying to do is trying to figure out how is it that we create housing that works for the residents, for the people that are going to live there, not just now but going forward, and it's going to work for the communities, not just now but going forward. And the way I think about it is a kind of feedback loop where affordable housing needs are affected by the economy, how and where the economy is growing. But then how the economy grows and evolves partly depends on the availability and functionality of affordable housing. And that's really a challenge. So it's not just a matter of finding a vacant site, putting together some financing to put up some housing, and sort of pursuing blindly units, because units don't mean anything unless they're integrated into the rest of the lives that are going to be lived by the residents and the community around it. So I think that, I guess my theme is that it's all of our challenge, and the state is, and I personally am very excited about being a part of that challenge, working together with developers, with towns, with housing authorities, with advocates to try to expand the housing that works for communities and for residents. So the state has put an incredible amount of resources, starting with this administration, towards affordable housing. One of the things that we've done this year in August was to publish, I think maybe for the first time, it's always risky when you claim that, but for the first time in a long time, I guess I could say that, a schedule to alert the development community about the opportunities that are available in competitive rounds in advance at the beginning of the year, and I hope that the resources will be available so that we can continue to do this on an annual basis and set up a kind of process that's both transparent and lends itself to the kind of planning that's necessary to make affordable housing as efficient as possible. Because what we're asking from developers is no small task. What we're asking is, and in this I think about a project that was highlighted a short time ago, Ferry Crossing, a great project, and one that when I think about it, I think this is a project that sets up the bar for other projects. What we're looking for is housing that pushes the boundaries of what's possible. How cost-effective can units be delivered? How integrated into the community can they be delivered? How can they take advantage of design features that make it very attractive, energy-efficient features that make it that reduce operating costs? The mix of housing that makes it sustainable over the long term. We're really asking for people to push the boundaries. That requires planning, and hopefully we're doing our part to try to facilitate that kind of planning. Just a few things that I want to point out here. The congregate housing RFP is on the streets at the moment. The 9% tax credits are due in a few days. This round of the 9% marks our first effort to create an online submission option. Ideally, we're going to be moving towards all online submissions, but we want to phase that in responsibly, understanding that people have their processes already. But our aim is to make sure that what we're doing is maximizes the convenience for our applicants. The other thing I want to point out is the DEC-sponsored programs that we released last week. And in particular, I want to just point out that what that is really our effort to invite the development community, both developers, advocates, CDFIs, to come to us with the best ideas they have about using state dollars, leveraging state dollars in a way that maximizes a benefit and the expansion of affordable housing in ways that the state can't do through on a project-by-project basis. This is something that I think has been done in various ways previously, but I don't think it's ever been done in the sense of not just leveraging dollars and person power outside of the state's staffing, but also really trying to catalyze the best ideas for how we can expand affordable housing that works. So that's on the streets now. There's a very quick turnaround time on that, but we've tried to tailor our demands for application submissions to be consistent with the amount of time that we have available. Beyond that, we've got a busy year ahead of us, as you can see. There we go. Here are some other programs, and this is just a sampling. There are other programs that I think are relevant, but I just wanted to point out, without going into the specific parameters, we have that information available, and I can certainly provide that. But these are some of the programs that should be on, if you're a town, if you're a housing authority, if you're a developer, these are the kinds of programs that should be on your radar that we at DECD administer or directly funding. The CDBG Small Cities program has funded a number of projects in the area, in particular the 2011 awardee in North Canaan for ADA compliance and energy efficiency upgrades at Wangham Village. But I also want to, I'm also very happy to announce that a few moments ago I got confirmation that that the governor has announced the awardees for 2012, and one of those awardees is actually, it's very in the spirit of the day, is a multi-jurisdictional application by Salisbury, as well as, and I know I'm going to leave somebody out, but Canaan, North Canaan, and Kent, and Sharon, and Goshen, and Norfolk, I believe. So there's an award for a rehabilitation revolving loan fund that we're very pleased to fund as well. Not planned, not scheduled, but very fortuitous. STEEP has been mentioned in some of the projects that have been highlighted, and that should certainly be part of that should certainly be on people's radar. You know, in thinking about housing that works, one of the things that's critical is thinking about, well, what other investments can we align with strictly affordable housing developments? And if you're a town, if you're a developer working with a town or your housing authority, the challenge is to think, what is the larger vision? What can you apply for under STEEP, which is administered by OPM and often by DECD as well, that is going to complement what's happening with other affordable housing funding. So think about ways in which CDBG Small Cities funding and STEEP funding can be used to create a sum that's greater than, create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. STEEP has funded a community house in Kent, facade improvements in Cornwall, commercial space in Salisbury, and in doing so, the idea is it's creating space, it's creating other things that are critical in the community so that housing can work. And if it's not doing that, then all we're doing is we're creating isolated benefits. But I think we can do more than that, and we should all strive for something better than that. Also, here's the state-sponsored housing portfolio, where the governor, in reaction to disinvestment in housing that had been financed in part, in whole or in part by with state dollars since the post-war years, it was actually referenced earlier today, has committed to $30 million a year for the next 10 years. Actually, fiscal year 13, the current year, is the first year of that. We announced 10 projects, including Sharon Ridge and Cougarman Village in Sharon. And going forward, we expect to be working our way through the entire portfolio, both through direct grants and loans, but also through pre-development funding to help projects that really need to start thinking about how they redevelop to become housing that works, rather than the housing that they were when they were initially built, maybe 60 years ago. Home funds are available, brownfields are available. Those are things that, again, should be on people's radar. Lastly, I just want to sort of focus on give something of a shout out to a couple of projects that have come up. Stewart Farms Apartments, which I think reflects more of the kind of project that we would fund through a competitive round like our CHAMP round, and we'd be looking at what we would be looking at what's special about this project. Not looking so much at the gross number of units, but looking at, again, how those units function within the community. Looking at the efficiencies, because we have to do the best with, we have to do the most with the funding that we have available, but really looking again at what makes this unit special. It's a competitive process, and so we're always looking at in what way is this development going to enhance the community in addition to providing affordable housing units. In what way is it going to help us reduce the problem of the unaffordability of housing in the state? And Sharon Ridge has already been featured as well. This is a case of, this is one of the projects that I mentioned before that's going to benefit from the state-sponsored housing initiative. And this is in addition to this 10-year, $300 million initiative, is in addition to the approximately $200 million that was within the that was allocated by the legislature in the biennial budget. So we're talking about $500 million at this point. We're in the process of preparing the budget for the next 2 years. So, so this is why I start off with, it's an incredibly exciting and busy time in Connecticut. We're finally tackling things that should have been tackled a long time ago, and I hope we're doing it with a vision about affordable housing that is more mature about the way in which how affordable housing functions in the communities. And I'll leave it with that.
Thank you, Nick. And our final panelist presentation is Matthew Nelson from New York.
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you to the sponsors and the hosts of today's event. It's a pleasure for me to be here not only on behalf of the state of New York and the agency that I represent, but as a resident of Columbia County. I live in rural Columbia County, so I fit within the region that the Berkshire Community Foundation serves. So that's especially fitting for my participation in today's event. I thought perhaps in looking at today's agenda that the planners were saving the best for last on both panels. Because Blair finished the first panel and I get to finish the last panel. I think they did that only to give us the tough task of doing cleanup. So I'll follow in Blair's footsteps in that capacity. And I'm pleased to do so in part because when I was invited to participate in this conference and I threw my presentation together in short order after connecting last week with Jennifer, you know, the themes of what Jennifer wanted to address in today's symposium rang true with me personally as well as my professional capacity. And the two themes that I took out of our initial conversation were the issue of coordination and collaboration between rural communities in addressing affordable housing needs in the Berkshire Taconic region, and that's an issue that exists not here but everywhere, of course, across all of our states. And beyond that, the other theme was innovative ideas and strategies for funding. So I'm going to touch on both of those things. I'm pleased to represent Governor Andrew Cuomo, who I'm sure most of you know got his start in affordable housing and working with the homeless population in New York State, particularly downstate in New York City, before he served as the Secretary of HUD in the Clinton administration. So that's a great thing for New York because we have a governor who clearly supports housing initiatives from one end to the other. For me, it can also make my job challenging because you know, the boss always knows more than you know, so you can't really go too far down the road without getting called to task from time to time, but it helps keep us focused. Governor Cuomo is focused in his administration on efficiency and effectiveness of government in these stark, lean economic times that we face. And one of the things that I want to talk about in relationship to that, and the first theme that I took away from my conversations with Jennifer, is the agency that I represent, New York State Homes and Community Renewal, recently underwent a very drastic change to become what we are today by way of integrating all of the agencies that you see up here. I have some touchstone in each of these in some way or another, but these are the collection of agencies and public benefit corporations that exist in New York State to serve affordable housing and community development needs across the state. And within the last year and a half, the state undertook an effort to consolidate and integrate all of these into one umbrella entity called Homes and Community Renewal, which has benefited us greatly. We have a much more collaborative and coordinated approach to how we do business among these entities. We have unified boards that serve to understand the cooperative network that are the projects and programs that we fund. So it strikes that theme quite well. Just a couple of highlights. You know, we're responsible for more than 1.3 million units throughout New York State. We're obviously much bigger than our partners on stage here geographically, but we also are very rural. I mean, we have urban centers, but they're shrinking urban centers by way of economic decline in all of them, and are all rooted in the economic engine of the agricultural rural networks that surround them. And just on the bottom here are a number of the things that the agencies you saw on the prior screen do. I won't go into all of those, but we have a broad scope of what we do, from bonds and federal dollars to rent laws in New York City. Jumping ahead, so again, under integration and coordination and collaboration, the similar programs administered by the various agencies are now organized into 3 units. I represent one of those 3 units, which I'll touch on in a minute. The first one is our Housing Finance and Development unit that fund development of affordable housing, multifamily developments, the multi-million-dollar deals across the state, both small projects and large projects in some of our urban areas, and utilizing the low-income housing tax credits, bond financing, loans, and award programs as well. We have our Housing Preservation Unit, which does Section 8 asset management, the Federal Weatherization Assistance Program, which has been a huge driving arm in terms of job creation and economic development in New York State since the days go back to the ARA dollars from 2008. And then the unit that I oversee, which is the Office of Community Renewal, and I'm not even sure I got everything on here that I oversee. I have a hard time keeping track of it all, but much like my colleagues to my right here from Connecticut and Massachusetts, I oversee the state's Community Development Block Grant Small Cities Program, the New York State Home Program, one of my particular favorites, the New York Main Street Program, the Affordable Housing Corporation, which has 3 prongs to it that allow you to do new construction, acquisition and rehab, or just home improvement in small grants to nonprofits and government entities around the state. We do a lot of work in rural communities across New York State with those dollars. We have neighborhood stabilization. In particular interest here in the middle of the screen is the rural area revitalization projects, and then at the bottom the rural preservation program, which Blair spoke of earlier and of course is a stellar representative of in New York State. Those all fall underneath the umbrella of community renewal. We like to think of ourselves in the OCR world, as we call ourselves, Office of Community Renewal, OCR. We are rural because we don't really do a lot of work in urban areas. Our work among the portfolio of programs that I oversee is done in large part in rural communities and smaller municipalities around the state. Jump to the next slide here. This is a snapshot of the funding behind the programs that you saw on the other screen. For 2012, we had our funding divided between 2 different application portals, if you will. The first one is the New York State CFA, which stands for Consolidated Funding Application. We had $41.2 million in there for a share of the CDBG, as well as some of our Main Street urban initiatives and rural area revitalization programs. The housing funding that I oversee for 2012 is $46.4 million, split up between the programs you see here on the screen that, unfortunately for those in this room, you may have just gotten in, but we just closed our application window on those beginning of August. So we're in the process of reviewing applications for all of these programs right now. So as Nick talked about it being a busy time, I can relate to that. It's a very busy time for us as well right now. You know, talking about themes, Nick talked a lot about economic development, as did Susan and others. There's no question that affordable housing is jobs. Community development is jobs. There's a lot of text on here, and I don't expect you to read it all. I'll just hit some of the highlights on here. You know, one of the facets I oversee is the Community Development Block Grant Economic Development Program. So that's dollars that I help administer exclusively for economic development and job creation. But for the housing programs that we do, it's clear from the analysis that we've done that housing activities create jobs, not only construction jobs, but permanent jobs for the maintenance and care of those facilities, and the ongoing work behind those. But one thing we always try to remember and is constantly said around the office is that you can build all the housing that you want, but if you don't have jobs for that housing, you won't have people to fill that. So you have to be really thoughtful about where you're building and why you're building and how you're building. It's sort of the reverse of what was mentioned earlier by one of the panelists about having the jobs but nowhere for those people to live. And so you can find the problem on both ends of the paradigm. I put some information up here about the Rural Area Revitalization Program, which is fairly new and reincarnated, I should say. It's been around for a number of years, but due to budget shortfalls in New York State was unfunded for a number of years. And thankfully this year we got a small, but not insignificant $4 million into the program to help revitalize it a little bit. And so we have those funds out, and we're reviewing applications for those right now. And they provide grants of $50,000 to up to $200,000 to nonprofit-based organizations and charitable organizations for really targeted plans in rural areas of less than 20,000 people, focused on finite target areas that have a blend of housing as well as economic development and community development. So it can be a community center, it can be a main street with downstairs commercial and upstairs residential. It's a great program with lots of flexibility, and we help design it with lots of flexibility so that it would allow for the variety of needs in rural communities to be addressed and not try and put everything in a one-shop-fits-all mentality. The next few slides I have are just some pictures, and they're, I wouldn't call them case studies necessarily, except for some highlights. This next one may be maybe recognizable to many of you. In particular, one person I recognize in the audience, I think Linda is back here. This is a snapshot of, as you can see, Local 111, which is Linda's restaurant in Philmont, New York. And Philmont Beautification Corporation is a community organization, not-for-profit, that came together over the last 6 years or so with lots of community support and has done a fantastic job of revitalizing Philmont in Columbia County. And as you can see on the top, that's the before, and on the bottom is the after. It's almost unrecognizable, but it's a fantastic transformation of an old service station into an award-winning, highly recognized, and sought-after restaurant. I've been there. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go. And I'm not saying that just because Linda's in the room. It is a fabulous place. And to drive down Main Street in Philmont today versus, I think even 3 years ago, you'll see a drastic difference, and it's evidence of not only what dollars can do, but what a community can do. And when you come together and you forge a partnership and you forge a bond, and you come together to say, we're going to do this for the sake of our community, to keep our kids here, to provide a place that we want to call home. So that's a great case study. This is just a picture of a building in Watertown, and I put this up here to demonstrate that while I represent one part of the myriad things that we can do, much like my colleagues here, so much of what we do is layering of other funds, and this building in particular took in CDBG, Main Street, what we call LIC in our shop, the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, to revitalize the central building in Main Street, Watertown, and it's provided a big shot in the arm for their economy and their Main Street there. This is a snapshot of some of the recent accomplishments of this agency from our affordable housing development. Some of this is a little dated, but we continue to add to these numbers. So this is certainly fitting, and I won't spend a lot of time looking at those, but we'll keep this moving along. One of the things I wanted to carry in for my theme today is the role that all of you play in your various capacities as a resident, as a developer, as an advocate, no matter what your function might be. We all have a place to advocate, and I think you have to be smart about how you advocate. Elton went through his points at the end of his presentation, which I thought were fantastic, about patience and persistence and seeking professional development. Those are key and mostly spot on. I would add to that by saying you need to know your needs, you need to know what you have to offer, and you need to know your base of support. And I think that goes to what Aaron talked about with municipal planning and getting the support of your community, not only residents, but your leaders as well. And that can be as local as mayors and town supervisors, right up through to state and federal officials as well, to the extent that it makes a difference. So these are a couple of suggestions of things that I would recommend. And then the last point, touching on the second theme that I took out of the conversation with Jennifer in advance of today's event, was the new ideas and innovative strategies, which I think are important. We always have to be thinking about that, especially in a day and age with the economy being what it is. Our agency in recent years has taken an aggressive approach to do unified funding. So similar to what Nick's doing in terms of presenting it in advance and letting you know what's out there to come, we've put it all together to do the best we can for one-stop shopping, if you will, and making it all available at once, so you can put together a comprehensive program that layers in the things that you need to get there. Our agency just last week announced $72 million in capital funding for shovel-ready, affordable, multifamily projects across New York State, using $25 million in the low-income housing tax credit, as well as $4 million in the state housing tax credit, and a number of other programs, including the federal home program capital allocation that we have for our agency. So those of you who are here from New York and have knowledge of projects that are shovel-ready. You know, go advocate that your folks get applications, and I think that they're due in November. That just was announced, so there's plenty of time for that. And the last piece, again, with credit to our governor and his effort to simplify the process in New York State and tie things together. Last year created the consolidated funding application, which we were in with housing last year, we're out with housing this year, but we do have all of those other programs from urban initiatives and rural area revitalization and some of the CDBG dollars. But what the governor did was take agency funding from our agency as well as 12 or 13 others and put them together in one application online with it broken down in a competitive process region by region. And it's a work in progress. We're only in our second year. There's lots to be learned still, but even if you're not from New York, I encourage you to go online to the website here, regionalcouncils.newyork.gov, just to learn a little bit about what we're doing and how a collaborative, coordinated regional approach can really make a difference towards coming out with some good product at the end of the day. So that's where I will end my presentation, and thanks.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Susan, Jay, Aaron, Nick, and Matthew for those presentations. I think the one thing I came away with is there are a lot of resources there, and I hope it was interesting for the audience to hear them, and watching the panelists, I think it was interesting for them to hear each other and some of the things that may be happening in different jurisdictions. I'd like to allow for one or two questions. Are there any questions? And then I don't want to eat too far into the reception time, but the panelists will be available also, I think, afterwards for some one-on-one questions. But any questions at this point? Anybody would like to ask our panel? Yes, David.
This is specifically directed to Aaron, if I may pick you up.
I figured that. Go ahead, just jump in.
The opening remarks by Bill reinforced, I guess, the American dream of affordable housing, but more specifically, affordable ownership. And so much of today's information that was conveyed related to rental, especially your remarks, so that's why I singled you out. I was wondering if there's any resources that are going to open up for those of us who look at our community's needs through an in-depth analysis and find that we have substantial rental affordable units, but we have a commitment to try to fund and find the resources for ownership units.
Yeah. Last week, we had our first homeownership advisory group meeting. Tim Geller is on that group. And we are looking to open up for funding for homeownership development in 2013. We're trying to determine the best way to target that. We had a great discussion at the first meeting, as I think Tim will attest to. He pointed out the issue of difficulty getting financing for townhouses and condos, given the restrictions that Fannie and Freddie, with the lending community today. So there's clearly some barriers we have to overcome, but we are most likely going to do that. So I think there will be some dedicated resources for homeownership going forward. That group is also looking at not just new production, but also the financing system for first-time home buyers. We have just incredibly low interest rates and more affordable prices relative to 5-7 years ago. But on the other hand, a very tightened lending criteria and underwriting, down payment requirements going up. So fewer younger families are able to really get into the game right now, unfortunately, and this is the time we should be doing it, I think. And we've always in Massachusetts had responsible home ownership among the nonprofit sector and the lending community in terms of making sure there's home buyer counseling, whether it's through programs that the Federal Home Loan Bank has funded or mass housing. So if we're going to expand home ownership, I think we want to make sure, obviously, to focus on responsible lending and support for the homeowners. So I hope that answers your question.
If I can, I'd like to just piggyback on that for a second. We offer in New York, among the programs I oversee, in particular the home program in our Affordable Housing Corporation dollars, They're flexible for either rental or homeownership, depending on what the applicant wants to do with those dollars. We expect that they do the necessary work in their community to identify what their needs are. The state did a housing needs analysis in the last few years to help identify the specific needs of communities based on community response, whether there's a greater need for one or the other. One of the issues that we face in New York State, and I know we're not alone in this because it's a national problem with the economy, is it's a very soft market, and it's hard to get these homes sold once they're built. I mean, the vision is great, the need is there, the market doesn't support it. Simply from a cost-benefit analysis, the cost of construction, in some of these single-family units can run up, $250,000, $300,000, depending on the market you're in. And we're seeing some homes at one organization come to me the other day to say, $240,000 green homes, we're trying to sell them for $80,000 and we can't do it. Which is just, you think about the fact that you could get a home for $80,000 and they can't sell them. So it's a tough balancing act.
And we did talk about those very issues and what we're calling micro-targeting. If we are going to open back up, you got to do it in the right location.
That's absolutely right.
It doesn't fit everywhere, but I think in our state of Massachusetts, we've done over 1,000 single-family guarantees this year. Might not fit in in Lenox or Williamstown, but there are some opportunities in our federal agency.
I mean, there's just such pent-up demand, in my view, for home ownership. And for Mass Housing's no mortgage insurance product is at record levels right now in terms of the lending volume. So clearly, there's incredible demand, and we shouldn't forget about that and make sure we continue to have a balanced policy, both rental and affordable home ownership is something we want to focus on.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point I do want to turn the podium back over to Jennifer Dowley. But before I do that, I want to underscore something she mentioned this morning. Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation is about to enter, or maybe it has, its 25th year. Jennifer has been its president, although she's not much past 25 herself. She has been our president for more than half of that time, 13 of those 25 years. She is so integral to everything that Berkshire Taconic is and has become. It is now one of the most vital institutions in our region. Jennifer, we do thank you for all that you have done and continue to do to move the region forward, and we do welcome you back to your podium.
That was a lovely and most unexpected reintroduction. And I get to thank all of you, our incredible speakers today, this panel, the previous panel, all of you in the audience, the leaders, the volunteers, the professionals, all working very hard on a daily basis to make this part of the world a better place. One of the interesting things about Berkshire Taconic is that we are generalists. We care deeply about the community. We're connected to all of our communities. Our goal is really to make life better here. We think about it and do it every day. We are not specialists. So for me personally, to sit here this afternoon, hearing people who are steeped in the details and the expertise of this area has just been thrilling. I want you to know that we will have a copy of all of the slides of the presentation today on the Housing Us website. We will also stay in touch with the speakers. Information that they have that is appropriate and relevant for all of us will be posted there as well. I'd like to invite you all to stay in touch with us, sign up on the Housing Us mailing list out in the lobby. Jocelyn Eyre, who is down here in the front, is our most worthy and talented coordinator. She compiles a newsletter that will go out to people electronically, maybe a couple of times a year. But it's a way for all of us to stay connected, for you to learn from each other, for us to learn from you, and hopefully to bring resources to our community that might not have been there otherwise. So thank you. wait a few minutes. Extraordinary things are going to happen here on the stage. This will all disappear, and then suddenly there will be wine and cheese here and all of us. So thank you again.